What's the weirdest thing someone wanted to put in their will? I'm a qualified solicitor. My two favourites are a lady who wanted to create a trust fund of £100,000 for her pet fish. When I asked if it was a special kind of fish, she confirmed it was just a normal goldfish, but she wanted it to be fed fresh avocado every day and be looked after by a local dog walker after she died. She was absolutely serious. There was also another lady who confessed that she had a secret daughter and she wanted to leave said daughter some money and photographs without the rest of her family finding out. Even her husband doesn't know. That'll be a fun conversation when she passes away. My great-granddad has a clause in his will that stated something along the lines of, "If any of the beneficiaries decide to dispute the contents of the descendant's estate, their share becomes $1 and not a cent more." Seems like a pretty good way to maintain harmony among his survivors. I have this in my will. If someone isn't happy with my dying wish, they can politely say no and pass on it. If someone wants to be greedy, they get nothing but $1 minus postage and handling. My grandfather saved his kidney stone so that he could leave it to my cousin. They never really got along. When my grandfather passed, his will asked that I clean out his shed and I alone do it. I found green herb seeds, old-timey film reel-style adult films of undressed women, which was hilarious, and a bunch of other unsavory paraphernalia. 50s flick knives as well. So it's a bit like clearing his browser history for him, but cooler. A relative worked for a firm preparing wills and was confronted by an executor who had an edict to scatter the deceased's ashes from a microlight aircraft. He couldn't fly one. She kindly pointed out to him that the drafting said nothing about whether said microlight was in flight at the time of scattering. Okay, on the one hand, I despise honouring the letter but not the spirit of the law like this, and it's a little disrespectful. But then, whatever that relative was thinking, it's very, very inconvenient to go up and learn to fly a plane for this one single purpose, and I don't know how well they knew the deceased. Also, I don't love the idea of burning all that fuel for this one flying license that you'll never use again, and the deceased wasn't really in a position to complain. I had a Russian client, son of an oligarch. His father created a trust which provided dispositive provisions for if he was kidnapped and not found within a certain number of months. It freaked me out. I believe the will had similar language too, but I can't remember now. Now that I think about it, I believe there was a separate document, in addition to the trust, that provided that his will should be effective to the extent he was kidnapped and not recovered within a certain period of time. My friend's mother had in her will that the cat gets to live in my house alone until it expires. That cat lived there for a few years alone with a caregiver checking in on it. Yes, she was rich. I worked with plenty of estates and trust accounts over the years. This particular scenario isn't so much about the will itself being strange, but the circumstances that led up to the trust account being opened. I worked at a bank in the estates department. I was an administrator who managed the files, including encroachments upon the capital. Like, I want to take out some money now, please. I had this one account, multi-million-dollar trust for one single beneficiary, the son of the deceased. What's interesting is that the son killed the parents with a hammer in a grotesque and brutal fashion. He pled insanity. He'd call once a year from the penitentiary or mental hospital, requesting $50 for commissary, to buy chips and gum. The call was always very strange. He was very polite and sounded very medicated. The quality of the call was always very tinny, like he was far away from the phone. While the will might have been voided by their murder, my understanding is that in this case, since it was determined that the beneficiary was not of sound mind and was placed in an institution as a result of his actions, he was not in fact convicted. Thus, the terms of the trust would hold true. Had he been deemed guilty and of sound mind, the trust definitely would have been voided. Just last week, I handled a matter where the parents left millions in artwork to various people, wads of cash to various charities, and only left their kids, the family cats. Turns out they did it because the kids got them the cats to comfort the parents in their old age, and the parents fricking hated cats, but the kids wouldn't let them get rid of the animals. My mum put in her will that if she dies under any suspicious circumstances, that my sister and I won't be left anything. She watches a lot of true crime. She's an upper-middle-class realtor. She makes money, but not enough money to be murdered over. Also, neither of us are murderers. Does it need to be said? This one isn't necessarily crazy, just an interesting glimpse into the mind of a kind old woman in her 90s. My aunt and uncle, both were more like parents and incredibly beautiful people, passed away within a few weeks of one another. When my uncle became ill, the aunt tried to work on a will with her long-term lawyer, but she was just kind of old and out of it. Her main concern the entire time was small knickknacks like a jar of pennies she wanted a distant cousin to have, or a used jacket from the 70s she bequeathed to a sister-in-law. It was quite touching how much time she actually spent considering each item and who would get it. Most of the items were used and didn't really hold any sentimental value. She just wanted them to go to good homes. When she passed away, everyone knew exactly who was getting each odd item. The real kicker is when the lawyer told the primary beneficiaries that she never actually got around to the bigger assets and all that jazz. She basically told the lawyer, "Pay for our funeral and anything we owe, and then family members X, Y, and Z can figure out the rest." It ended up being millions in homes, a lakefront property, jewelry, antique firearms, vehicles, life insurance policies, stocks, bonds, gold coins. Luckily, the family was very close, and everything went off without a hitch. They were amazing people who wanted to keep family items in the family. They just didn't put that much weight on their incredible wealth. They also hid their wealth amazingly. We all knew that they were very comfortable, but no one had any idea that they were deep into 8-figure assets. It's just funny to see a random niece get a set of plastic cups, worn dance shoes, and a check for $125,000. Whenever I visited my old grandma in Nicaragua, I'd always see my aunts and uncles being weirdly nice to her, almost as if she was a famous person. People would be visiting her house to greet her and striking a conversation. One day, my mother walked into my grandma's room to have a conversation with her, and I remember the flight back, 3 or 4 hours after the conversation. I asked what it was about. She told me that Grandma used to have children that almost never talked to her, and now that she's sickly, they're trying to act nice to get stuff out of her will. My grandma wanted to talk to my mum to ask what she wanted from the house. My mum was always the favorite growing up since she cherished Grandma, and Grandma wanted to pay her back for being a good daughter. My mum replied, "I don't want anything from you, I just want your love," and they both smiled at each other. Also, she wanted us to take a washing machine back home to sell it for cash, but we declined. And by the way, my grandma's still alive, she's not given up yet. Good on her for knowing that and giving credit where it's due. Now you just have to stop those other relatives from moving in there and getting real manipulative if it ever looks like the end is nigh. Sounds like it might eventually be the sort of thing that tears the family apart, but if the others are a bunch of vipers, good riddance. I read a lot of estate documents as part of my job. There is so much subtle shade in them occasionally, it can be pretty entertaining. One super wealthy lady had a huge section for the care and well-being of her pets, with primary and successor caretakers, a certain amount of money from the trust for care and feeding of each pet. One pet owner might receive $3,000 a month to take care of one of her pets after she passed, and certain stipulations on how they were to be cared for. While some might see it as excessive, the language and stipulations she had and how they were referred to showed that she really, really loved her pets. In that same will and trust, she also left a slew of people only $1 so that there would be no chance they could take the trust to probate court on the basis that they were merely forgotten. That part had so much subtle shade. A lot of, "They know what they did," and "They are well aware of their guilt in the matter." She split up about $2 million amongst 5 or 6 different animal rescues and animal welfare charities. It was about 200 pages long, and I swear I read the entire thing just for the sheer entertainment value. An aging woman my family knew left her house, which was very large and in a very affluent neighborhood, and estate to family friends for so long as her cats were alive and taken care of in said house. After the pets died, the house was to be sold and the remaining estate donated. The weird thing is, it's been like 20 years and the cats are still alive. Also, they've changed color. My great-uncle's official will gave the contents of his outhouse to the city council of a nearby town after they'd tried to take his land twice to build a new water treatment plant. He spent quite a few years fighting eminent domain claims and just wanted to give them something in return. As a joke, his kids boxed up all the books and magazines in the outhouse and dropped them off at City Hall. Not a will, but a deed. The city I work for was renovating a small park that was donated to the city in the 1910s. We went looking through the handwritten deed for easements or other restrictions and found that the family could claw the property back if the park were not perpetually provided with a fountain of pleasant running water fit for consumption by man and beast alike. The family still has descendants in town, so we installed a new water fountain with a dog bowl filler just to be safe. Here's one from one of my dad's law partners. He had a lady come in with an itemized list of books and wanted her will to contain all of the books and who'll get what based on her choosing. So basically, she decides who gets what specific books instead of letting her beneficiaries decide. The truly astonishing thing is how many books and how specific they get. According to Dad's law partner, her list is about 2,000 books to be divided amongst 30 people. She's apparently very specific and comes back at least once a year to add all the new books she's gotten. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My sister's mother-in-law is leaving her house to her 3 sons. If one wants to sell out his third of the house, he has to sell it to the other 2 brothers for $1. They can sell it if all 3 agree. I think she wants her sons to use it like a cottage, a place where they will visit and stay for a while. 2 of the sons live on lakes nearby, so they would never use it as such, and the 3rd son lives with his mum in the house. He does take on a lot of the care responsibilities of his mum. She's 93, so that's nice. The other 2 brothers have done most of the home maintenance for decades, including weekly mowing and cleaning, and they still help in the care. When she dies, which unfortunately could be very soon, the 3rd son might not move out. He could freeload in that house forever, and his brothers would have to share in the tax payments and upkeep if they want to maintain their inheritance. A Furby collection from models collected in the late 90s. They were convinced they'd retain future value. This was in 2011. I'm the executor of my grandmother's will. I'll get the house and everything in it and a share of life insurance that's split 3 ways between myself, my sister, and my mum. My mum has always said that all that my dad, my grandmother's son-in-law, would like to have is some table. Well, in the will, there's like a whole paragraph that states how my dad gets nothing. He doesn't lay a finger on anything in the house or any money. How my dad is basically worthless and deserves nothing, and how he was a crap dad, and she begrudgingly has my mum in the will. Thanks, Grandma, I'll appreciate the awkwardness. Good God. And to my favorite grandchild, not the other one, I leave the majority of my possessions as long as he keeps the worthless sack of crap who spawned him away from all my stuff. My daughter can have 1 or 2 things, I guess. Same energy, to be honest. My grandpa gave me all of his tools, which sounds dumb, but we're in the same trade, and it was a real life changer. It included a lift and his old shop truck, so I pretty much got everything to start my own shop, apart from the building. Also, a pretty good chunk of change and his dog Tanner, as long as I made sure his live-in girlfriend at the time got nothing at all, and I told my uncle he was fat and his wife was going to leave him if she couldn't find his pecker. There was literally a script inside the will. It all went smoothly, and my uncle lost weight, and Janice is a jerk, and it turned out Tanner is kind of a jerk too, but it's okay, because my grandpa was kind of a jerk. A good one, but still sort of a jerk. They have the same mustache and eyebrows now, so I come home from work every now and again and get stared down by my grandpa while I go number 2. I work for a will writer and trust specialist in the UK, currently studying towards my TEP. One of our earlier clients passed recently. Turns out the man she left almost everything to, including the residue of her estate, which was considerable, was her regular taxi driver. She also named him as her executor. He had no clue. The woman named as her executor and main beneficiary of her previous 2 wills, a close friend of many years, was understandably flabbergasted and contested the will. We responded to her solicitor's Lark vs. Nergus request and informed the taxi driver, who didn't even know our client had passed away. And the will was upheld. The aforementioned friend was left a legacy of £5,000 if I remember correctly, but her nose was clearly out of joint. Bonus observation, it takes a lot less than £5,000 being up for grabs to make families turn against each other. It can get really nasty. One of the most startling things I've learned in my short time in this business. I had the first son, so my dad decided to leave me more. Except he did the math wrong and it came out to 105%. He had dementia. Kind of related, I worked on a divorce between a couple who fought over every single thing in the house, separating pillows and such. They were left 52 gallons of vanilla extract by their grandmother. In a secondary proceeding, he was awarded all but 5 gallons. 2 weeks later, he sent a case of samples in Ziploc baggies to our office, along with a request to subpoena a urine test from his ex-wife to prove she whittled in the jugs before he picked them up. We never needed to, as she screamed in court that she did that in full just like he weed all over her during their marriage. They were nice. The same couple went to court for nearly 2 years over a Beanie Baby collection. They had 3 kids. My vindictive grandmother left my aunt $20 as a reminder of the $20 my aunt stole from her once. One client left $100,000 to his 2 cats so they could maintain their current lifestyle. My grandpa put in his will a chocolate bar for every one of his grandkids. Well, I have like 12 cousins and they're very difficult to track down. All of his estates and money he had in his will was at a standstill for months because they couldn't find my couple of cousins. I had to show the court that we put in effort to hire someone to track them down. The lawyer that was helping execute the will was blown away that someone had allowed this to be written, and was very vocal about why he'd highly suggest not to track them down. But I'm not complaining because I got a Toblerone out of the deal. I was forced to write a will in my early 20s due to the health insurance I get at work, and amongst my sensible stuff, the in-house lawyer said it was totally okay for this clause to be added. My funeral wishes are that I be buried in a coffin which has been spring-loaded, such that opening the coffin would cause alarm to future archaeologists. Then a bunch of addendums about how if I didn't have the money for this, I'd be cremated and have my ashes scattered in a specific place. I was always curious if I could request that my head be removed from my body before burial in the case of a zombie outbreak so I'd do minimal damage to future generations. My old landlord took 2 years to boot me out because her mother who owned the place died and she just wanted to sell the place. But her mother's carer said the mother verbally promised the house to her. Even though it was not written in the will, it still took 2 years of fighting in court to clear things up. No, the carer didn't get it in the end, even after all the appeals. In my mum's will, which I've seen, she's left me the kitchen table and chairs. She lives on a South Manchester council estate. My brother gets the sideboard. Wow, lucky! Imagine owning a table! Maybe if my parents pass away prematurely I could own mine someday, living that high life in an apartment with furniture and something other than garbage bags for curtains. My great-grandmother left most of her money to a local donkey sanctuary? No ma'am, in order to bequeath something you actually have to own it. My client wanted her ashes spread at the restaurant on the beach where she met her husband. That's really sweet. Not for everyone else getting Linda in their butthole, it isn't. I work in probate. The oddest thing I've seen in a will is to euthanize their beloved horse, have it cremated, and its ashes scattered with the deceased. Luckily for her horse, she named a horse that was already dead, so the one she got afterwards lived to see another farm. Me and a friend from middle school have an agreement that he gets $10 out of my estate. I also want all beneficiaries notified by a mysterious man in a dark suit, preferably on a dark rainy day. Lawyer here, probably the woman who wanted to gift the frozen splooge of her dead dog. Lots of people sending their friends and family on weird errands to spread their ashes, leaving money for people to take trips and spread them around the world with. Pet trusts are another fun one, leaving a whole whack of money in a trust to be used for the care of the pet during their life. However, my favorite ever, that I obviously didn't draft, was a lawyer who left the bulk of his estate, millions in today's dollars, to whatever Toronto area woman had the most children at a specific date some year in the future. I recall the winner had 10 kids. When a dad died, he set up financial installments, so as long as his daughter remains under a certain weight, dude was controlling her diet from beyond the grave. A famous case most law students read is of a mother who left a ton to her son, provided he married a Jewish woman. Well, he was already married to a non-Jewish woman. Big mess. My grandfather left me $1. He had dementia and confused my dad ripping him off with me. He left the rest of the family between $100,000 and a few million each. They all said they felt horrible because they knew the details, but not horrible enough to give up any of their share. The way I see it is that it was never my money to begin with, so it's not a loss. I'm just glad my sister got $100K. She needed it more than any of those others. A good clause is always, for reasons known to them, which is will speak for, you've gone and messed up, jerk, I don't forgive you. In my own will, I've left my father the contents of my kitchen trash can at the time of my passing, for reasons known to him. He could very well outlive me. His side of the family lives forever, like reaching 100 or more isn't unheard of for them. I take after my mother's side, which has significant heart disease. I understand I could follow either, both, or neither, but I could also just get hit by a bus tomorrow and die unexpectedly. I figured it was the safest to actively disinherit him rather than stay silent and assume I'll outlive him. Worked with a client who wanted language that her cats would be euthanized and buried with her. The moral part just went over her head, so we had to explain why legally we couldn't do that. One of the few clients who ever got under my skin. What's the scariest thing you've seen that no one believes you about? It would help if I had pictures to explain the setting here, but I used to fish at an abandoned houses pond near my home. Next to that property was a wealthy neighborhood of about 6 houses, mansions. One day, while getting off the bus, I saw a black Mercedes with fully tinted windows, which is rare in New Jersey, sitting in the driveway of the pond house. I found it odd and was kind of sad because I thought I'd never get to fish there again. The next day, I found out the man who lived at the end of the wealthy neighborhood had been shot in the head while he slept. Rumor has it he was involved in the mafia. I believe those rumors. I was sleeping at my cousin's house on New Year's Eve 2014. My 3 cousins, brother and I all decided to sleep in the same bedroom as our parents were staying out all night. We were old enough to stay at home on our own. The point is we were 100% the only people in the house that night and all slept in the same place. Woke up the next day and was getting in the car to leave when I had to look at my camera roll from the previous night. To my absolute horror, there were 5 photos of us all sleeping. Every single person was in the photos fast asleep, so there was no way any of us took those pictures. My aunt showed the photos to the landlord and he had no explanation. To this day, nobody knows who took them. Oh boy, this is a scary one. Do you think it was the landlord? I'm assuming he'd have the key. Maybe he'd have known the adults were away for the night. Yeah, not hard. Most phones allow you to use the camera without unlocking it. And if he left his phone on a table or something, then easy enough to use it. Right after high school, class of 91, I got a contract job with the Forest Service. We traveled all over the West doing gopher control in replanted clear-cuts. The gophers would eat the tender roots of the newly planted saplings, and we had to control them to give the trees a chance to get started. We were returning to our hometown after a long job in Oregon, driving across the desert near a government lab. It's about 3 a.m. and we're going at about 80 in a 55-mile-per-hour zone. Suddenly, a semi-truck, completely blacked out, no lights at all, bombs past us on this stretch of highway like we were standing still. Then, 2 army-style trucks also blacked out. Scared the crap out of us. We got back to our hometown and told several people what we saw, and no one would believe us. I still think they were doing freaky crap out there in that desert lab. If we'd tried to chase them or anything, we probably would have disappeared. In short, freaky blacked-out government trucks from a secret lab blew past us in the dark. I've never even heard of something like that, but that's just the thing. You wouldn't hear about something like that. You got a fleeting glimpse at something very secret there. My uncle used to live in Nevada near an Air Force base, and he saw stuff like this all the time. He said the scariest one was a blacked-out semi his hopped-up muscle car couldn't keep up with. Crazy stuff out there. No telling what goes on. My dad had top-secret clearance in the Air Force base and still clams up and gets weird about UFO stuff and secret tech. See, I'm not a big believer that there are aliens being hidden in Area 51 or anything, but stuff like this is absolutely riveting. What's being developed and being shipped around under the cover of darkness in these definitely not Secret Service mobiles? When I was little, 7 or 8, I woke up one night to a white dog sitting in the doorway of my bedroom. That was weird because we didn't have a dog or any other indoor pets. While I watched, it got up and went down the hall towards the living room. I got up, looked down the dark, empty hall, and went the opposite direction to my parents' room. I woke my mum up and told her there was a dog in the house. She got up and we looked, but didn't find anything. She thought I was dreaming. At some point when I was older, I found a picture of the dog my parents had when I was a baby. I learned from my mum that the dog often slept in the doorway guarding my room. But the dog died before I was 2. The dog in the picture was the dog I saw that night. In college, I had a summer internship in a national park that had just ended a wolf reintroduction program. A number of interns were housed in an area of cabins clustered together on a 1-lane gravel road. I was staying in a different area of the park and had gone over to the cabins for dinner one night. I left pretty late, close to midnight, and was enjoying the quiet walk down the road to my car. It was a clear night with a full moon, and the conifers growing on either side of the road shaded it almost entirely. As I'm walking, I see a light-colored shape on the other side of the road coming in my direction. I kept walking slowly, and as we drew towards each other, I saw that it was an enormous canid of some sort. Far too big to be a coyote, but as far as we know, all the wolves had been relocated. We each kept our pace, and it never turned its head or anything, just kept walking. I somehow managed not to pee myself, but by the time I got into my car, I was shaking so hard that I could barely get my key in the ignition. Everyone I've told thinks I was exaggerating, but I was stone cold sober, less than 10 feet from it, and that animal's back was up to my waist, easily the biggest dog creature I've ever seen. To clarify, I did see it clearly in the moonlight when it was close. It had the coloring and general characteristics, like a narrow head, snout shape and ears, of a light-phase coyote, but the bulk and size of a wolf. Larger than any Great Pyrenees I've ever seen. Looking back, it was definitely a benign encounter, just two folks out for a stroll, passing each other on the street. Was this by any chance at Yellowstone? Only asking because I visited there several years ago, and we became friendly with a waiter in a restaurant who told us about the huge wolf that they have that wanders the park. He said he saw it once and it was nearly twice the size of a regular wolf. He also said it wasn't aggressive or anything, just looked at him for a bit before walking away. I'm not sure about any relocation programs in Yellowstone, but it sounds like it might be the same wolf. Doing a service call on an apartment, and this lady has an obvious obsession with dolls, like those 15-inch tall pioneer-looking dolls. She's not home, so I go about my business, very uncomfortable, and even more so when I enter her bedroom. She literally has more than 300 dolls with doll heads tied to strings from the ceilings, and a small little altar-like thing in the corner of her bedroom, with a severed chicken head, and gargoyle-like statues and pictures of children. There's a pig's hoof hanging from a red cord in her bathroom. When I got to the dining room, there's a Ouija board and multiple dolls all arranged around a dismembered doll that's drenched in what I think was blood. I think I broke the human top speed record that day, and nobody believes me about it. It was probably voodoo, and Wazir had performed a blessing for the children in the photo. Spend some time in Haiti, and the old woman would do this with photos of people they cared about. The goats and chickens throw most people off, but it was probably a caring grandma just doing her ritual to make sure the kids were safe today. Maybe that isn't what's going on, but I'd just tell myself that. For my own sake of being able to sleep tonight, I'm going to assume that all the stuff was fake and she was messing with you. One day I walked into my leather couch ripped open. I lived alone. My mum and I were driving through rural Missouri late one night. It was dark and hard to see much beyond the headlights. All of a sudden, something scampered across the road in front of our car. We didn't hit it, but when it got to the other side of the road, on the shoulder, it sat up on its hind legs, turned around and looked directly at us. It had a long, thin tail, too thin to be a foxtail, too big in general to be a squirrel or possum. To this day, we both swear it was a monkey. People don't believe us, but the way it turned back and looked at us once it got to the other side of the road was so chilling and human-like. Based on the size, shape, and movement, it could only be some sort of primate. My mum used to yell at me to close the pantry door, and one day when I was home alone, I got a snack and left the door open. As I was walking away, the door slammed shut and I heard a voice say, "Close it." Quietly but intensely. I swear I literally grabbed my dog and ran faster than I've ever run before up to my room and locked the door. Let's just say I literally will never forget to shut that damn door again. Can you imagine being so slovenly that even the ghosts in your building start telling you to get your crap together? Talk about a wake-up call, man. I once walked into my living room to see a football that I've never seen before lying in the middle of the room vertically. It fell on one side where I guess it noticed me and proceeded to roll into the kitchen behind the counter and out of view. After standing there from awe and confusion, I went to look for it and it wasn't there. Never saw that again. In high school, I briefly dated a gothy chick whose idea of a good time was to hang out, and occasionally make out in the old graveyard at the edge of town. Not my favorite thing in the world, but she was cute and I was 16, so there you have it. One night she told me to meet her there. The place was dark and empty as always. I had my phone flashlight and was poking my way through the headstones to the tree that was our usual meet-up spot, when I saw some movement in my peripheral vision. Turned the light to where I thought it was in time to see a silhouette move behind a headstone about 30 yards away. I was sure it was her trying to scare me, which sometimes she did, and I called out to her, and in response I heard a female voice, but not hers, call the same name back to me, like it was mocking me. I turned and sprinted back to the road. I texted her from my car. She said she hadn't left her house yet. I cancelled on her and drove home. In my hometown, in Massachusetts, there's a colonial-era graveyard where I used to enjoy walking at night. I saw an odd-shaped gravestone that I didn't remember seeing before, much lighter color than the others, and as I got closer it seemed to be moving. I was really intrigued. Got closer and it was two people screwing. Oops, wasn't even that late. My friends and I used to frequently visit the abandoned Joseph P. Ladd School. It was rumored to be haunted. Most of the time I just assumed the noises were other people on the property. I'd never experienced anything supernatural there, just, scared because of the circumstances of what could happen. One of the last times I was there, I brought my crowbar because the state had started boarding and welding doors shut. So here I am trying to pry open a small enough gap between these two doors. There was a good 6-inch space between them where it was open. After a few tries, I'm getting pretty aggravated, saying to myself, is this freaking worth it? It was pretty well late night and the moon was really bright, so I didn't need my flashlight unless I was inside a building. Also, I didn't use it because of the risk of alerting security. So I'm peering through these two doors down this hall with my flashlight, and about 50 feet down the hallway, it looked like some light dust came into view. So the dust entered where my flashlight was aimed, and then suddenly, it turned. I could see the cloudy, barely visible outline of a chest, shoulders, and head. Nothing else. As it turned, I can still vividly remember what appeared to be the ghostly, misty outline of shoulders and a head moving towards the flashlight. So, as any person would, I ran away and screamed. Never have I been so scared in my life. New England is the best when it comes to spooky legends. Rhode Island has more legends than it does square feet. Lovecraft's quote sums it up perfectly. Searchers after horror haunt strange far places. For them are the catacombs of Ptolemies and the carven mausolea of the nightmare countries. They climb to the moonlight towers of ruined Rhine castles and falter down black cobwebbed steps beneath the scattered stones of forgotten cities in Asia. The haunted wood and the desolate mountain are their shrines, and they linger around the sinister monoliths on uninhabited islands. But the true epicure and the terrible, to whom a new thrill of unutterable ghastliness is the chief end and justification of existence, esteems most of all the ancient, lonely farmhouses of backwoods New England. For there the dark elements of strength, solitude, grotesqueness, and ignorance combine to form the perfection of the hideous. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Was with a bunch of kids playing around the street when I noticed a floating stick. There's no trees around and everyone else saw it. Put my hands around it to make sure it wasn't a spider's web or a string, but it was definitely floating. The moment I touched it, it fell. Still can't explain it to this day. I was driving to South Dakota to visit family and I drove all night. Around 7 a.m., tired, almost 45 minutes to my destination, I looked east from the highway and deep in the plains there was this huge golden bridge silhouetted structure. Mended with the clouds and the sparkle of the sun, it almost looked like heaven. I mean, it looked small from the car, but I understand depth perception, and up close that would be a huge Golden Gate-sized structure. Looks like it stretched from north to south as far as I could see. Rubbed my eyes? Still there. I just remembered thinking, I'm tired as heck. I've driven this road many times and there isn't anything this way except grassy plains. Fast forward maybe a year or two, I'm back in South Dakota working for the summer with my family. One day for work we had to drive down the same road about 8 a.m.-ish when one of the guys goes, I remember this one morning, we were driving down the same road for work and this golden bridge-looking thing, huge as frick, was on the horizon over there, pointing to the east where I saw it years earlier. All of a sudden, instantly when he said that, I remembered that moment from years earlier. I remembered it because I thought I was hallucinating, but they described exactly what I saw. This is South Dakota, and there isn't a huge golden bridge-looking object anywhere in the state. It still baffles me to this day. I try not to think too much on it because I haven't seen it since. Weird as heck, though. Every time I visit my family, I look to the east on that same stretch of road, but I haven't seen it again. My buddy and brother's evidence of seeing it only validated that I wasn't crazy and that they saw the same thing. I was about 4 to 6 years old and my mother was telling me to get ready for bed. I remember hopping on the bed and going straight for the window. I pulled open the curtains dramatically. I was face to face with a giant fly or moth head. Its face was staring straight at me and was huge, almost like a mask pulled over someone's head. I became hysterical trying to express what I saw and was told it was in my imagination. Now, this was in the window to the backyard. Our house was on a foundation above ground, so that window was about 10 feet off the ground. It's been over 17 years and I remember that creature staring back and the sheer horror of its eyes. Can't bring myself to look out the window at night now. My friend, I think you experienced whatever the equivalent of Pennywise was in your area, and you really need to get the heck out of there before he comes back after his long sleep. When I was 17, I was up late one night watching a movie in my living room. I was living in a condo at the time, a smallish building, only 3 stories, so not a lot of people. It was mostly middle-aged people and in the nice end of town, so we rarely heard noise from neighbors, especially late at night. So the movie ends and the credits roll. It's about 2 a.m. I'm playing on my phone and the condo is pretty quiet. Suddenly I hear a noise coming from the front door. It sounded like a long nail or claw slowly dragging across the door, and then a soft tap tap tap. This repeats several times. Meanwhile, I'm crapping myself. It was the most eerie, ominous sound. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I was too scared to look out of the peephole because I thought whatever it was might see my shadow looking out, as lights were on near the door. Who knows what they want? I'm not out here trying to die. The horrible scratching noise carries on for about 30 seconds and then stops. 20 minutes later, I got the guts to go and look in the hallway and nothing was there. And no marks are on the door. I still get the heebie-jeebies thinking about it. When I was 3 or 4 years old, I had a best friend named Abigail. We did everything together. Played in the sandbox, creeks and rivers, playgrounds, you name it, we were sidekicks. I even drew her portrait one day and told my mum to save it somewhere safe so I could give it to her on her birthday. I still have it somewhere, but I drew a girl with dark shoulder-length hair with a red bow in it. She was wearing a blue jumper-like dress with a long-sleeve red shirt under it, and brown shoes. I just remember I loved playing with her, and then one day I just never saw her again. Now, if this were my mum telling the story, she would just say that at this age, I was an independent little girl who liked to play and be by myself. She just thought Abigail was an imaginary friend. Until one day, when I was about 11 or 12 years old, the local historical society posted a researched historical article detailing the events of a tragic farmhouse fire that happened about 75 or 80 years prior on the property that our subdivision was built on. The fire was a devastating one in which a family of 6, 2 parents and 4 kids, were all killed. One of those kids was a 4-year-old and her name was Abigail. A picture of the family was included in the article, black and white, but you could clearly see the little girl had dark shoulder-length hair with a bow in it and was wearing a jumper with a long-sleeve shirt under it. To this day, my mum still refuses to believe my best friend was probably a ghost. My brother-in-law had an imaginary friend when he was very young, and he is absolutely convinced to this day that she's a ghost. He said they'd play together all the time, and even though he had 3 older brothers, he preferred to play with her. He recalls her waking him up in the middle of the night to play football with him in the hallway outside his bedroom, and he would always get up and play even though he knew he would get in trouble for it, because if he didn't, he said she would sit next to the bed and cry. She wore a red dress and little black shoes. He also remembers the last time he played with her. She told him she would have to leave soon and he wouldn't ever see her again. He was devastated and asked her why, and she replied that he was getting too old now. He's a big, super strong, no-nonsense, kind of intimidating guy these days, but when he talks about his little friend, he gets very serious and emotional. It's real to him. I used to live in an old 3-story row house with my father, mother, and older brother. It was fairly typical in that it made some old house sounds and had some areas that never really saw natural light, like the staircase and downstairs hallway. It was a pretty normal place, but in the late 80s, my father self-deleted. Over the course of about a year, we had a multitude of unusual happenings in the house. Most things small, shadows moving and objects not being where you left them, but some things, borderline violent, happened too, like an old lamp exploding and doors slamming shut. I was primarily the person who saw these things happening. That leads me to the biggest incident. I've told my mother, my brother, and some friends, and now my wife, but no one thinks it happened the way I remember it. I was 9 years old. My father had been gone for almost a year. I was sitting on my bed reading when a young man, maybe in his late 20s, looking disheveled and confused, opens my bedroom door. Startled, I shout, "Mom! There's a guy in my room!" He stood there for a second and looked straight ahead. "What do you want?" I asked, and he walked straight through my room and through the wall that connected to the neighbors as if he was immaterial. Immediately next door, I heard a scream of blood-curdling terror from my neighbor. She was screaming and crying loudly, and you could hear physical commotion. I kept shouting for my mum, who came in and comforted my crying and terrified 9-year-old self. I told her what had happened, and she could hear the screaming next door. She went over to the neighbor's house to find out what was going on. The neighbor's husband opened the door. Turns out his wife had just in that moment of screaming found out her brother had self-deleted. Now, I'm nearly 40 and I don't talk about these times very often. I don't know what it was, I don't know if I was crazy, I don't believe in ghosts. Looking back on those times, a lot of things didn't make sense. My family never really saw or experienced things on the same magnitude I did, so I've kind of kept it quiet. A light. I was alone on a forested, snow-covered mountain and there was a bright light just sitting in the middle of the trail. It was there all night. In the morning, there was nothing there. This is one of those horror movies where you're thinking, frickin' seriously, dude? You're going to investigate the spooky light? Of course there's a monster there. Don't go over there, you dumb idiot. I'm glad you didn't go check it out and get eaten. But I also want to know what the heck that light was. Perhaps next time, just have a quick look with your binoculars or something and report back to us. Listen, you started off sounding smart, but everyone who's seen a horror movie knows that if you look through binoculars, a monster will jump right up in front of you from nowhere while you're looking and jump scare/disembowel you. A white, smiling face at my window as I was laying down for bed. It was glowing as if it were a light source, and it had no nose that I can remember, just slits like a snake. Eyes had no color, just black pupils. Its mouth was wider than any human's. No hair either. And the height from the ground to my window is about 8 feet, and it was perfectly at eye level. My mother checked all around and there was nothing, but I swear to God I saw it and it was a person. She still teases me about it from time to time. When I was about 7 or 8, my neighbors had walkie-talkies and we would all play with them in the neighborhood and talk. For some reason, I changed my station because I couldn't hear them anymore. Then an older gentlemanly voice comes on and starts talking to me. He was telling me he was my uncle and his daughter was crying and he wanted me to say her name over and over to comfort her. Young me starts doing it and then I stopped because I freaked out. I ran and told my parents what happened and they didn't believe me. I've never touched one since because I know it was some perv getting off on it. I saw a UFO with my mother in Oregon one night. We were traveling when I spotted a triangle shape in the sky, formed by 5 bright lights. We stopped the car, got out and looked, and it's just hovering there, silently with no movement. I should have taken pictures or a video, but I was so caught up in the moment because I couldn't make out what I was seeing. Out of nowhere, this thing shot off into the horizon, faster than any man-made machine. We both remember clear as day, however very few people believe our story. What's the worst case of spoiled rotten that you've seen? My roommate is an application essay reader for a university's business school. He was just telling me about a kid who wrote his overcoming hardship essay about how he really wanted a boat because all of his friends had boats and it was hard for him to be left out. Then he overcame his hardship when his parents bought a boat. I guess his hardship wasn't a hard ship to get. Was at the Ford dealership getting my oil changed and killing time by walking through the big showroom. There's a Mustang GT350 sitting in the middle with a huge bow on it and folks gathered around waiting for someone. Minutes later, the family comes in with their son who immediately yells about wanting it in blue instead of black and denting the passenger door with a swift kick. The parents didn't even have money. He wanted new clothes and was told no, so he put his clothes in the bathtub and poured bleach on them. The parents brought him new clothes. Holy crap, that would have been a bleachy clothes-wearing dude if it was my son. Yep, the only way to get kids to realize that being a craphead isn't going to benefit them is to let them do it and deal with the consequences. Eventually, they'll learn that being a jackass doesn't pay off. In high school, 1987, this really pretty girl was about to turn 16 and her parents got her a fully frame-up, restored 65 Mustang. It wasn't what she wanted, so they got her a new Porsche 944, not the only one at my school. It was customized with rims and upholstery that had her name embroidered on it. When she graduated, they got her a new Lexus sedan. Her father was a preacher at a small rural church. Her mum was a stay-at-home trophy wife. Still have no idea how they pulled that off. I worked at a tax office and I can tell you that religion is a very profitable business. Sister refuses to look for a job and as a result moves back home. She uses my parents' vehicle to drive around with her boyfriend and go to parties and stuff. One day there's a family emergency and the car is not in the driveway for her to use. She throws a tantrum, trashes the house, and runs away with her boyfriend. By the way, my sister is 22 years old. That kinda sounds like the problem solved itself. A girl in my high school had totaled 4 cars by the time she graduated on account of crashing 2, flipping one onto someone else's lawn, and accidentally running someone else's car completely over. I have to be honest, 4 cars in presumably less than 5 years is almost impressive in terms of a person's inability to coordinate or learn from their mistakes, not to mention somehow not getting their license revoked. Okay, I've got one. My boyfriend's little half-sister. So her parents are real hippies. They live at least 40 minutes from the nearest town, which doesn't have much anyway. They live on an eco-friendly hamlet which her parents built from scratch. Since the age of, say, 10, she's now 16, my boyfriend's sister has been a stealer of money. Started off by taking coins when she was babysitting for neighbors, eventually finding out where stashes of cash were kept, and then the neighbors found out and told her parents. They were mortified but didn't do much apart from tell her off and make her promise she wouldn't do it again. Little things like that happened and same outcome. Then her granddad passed away, who left a share of $1 million to her mother, which was used to upgrade the farm, buy more land, among other things. She stole money from her dead granddad's wallet in his fricking pocket when he was lying in the house dead when no one was looking. All she got was a bit of a telling off. She never has to give the money back because she spends it first. Her parents just say, work it off by doing chores. Now she's 16 and her latest crimes have been stealing her mum's card to buy $800 of makeup online. Her parents took the makeup from her, hoping to return it, but not before she replaced the makeup in the boxes with old bottles. They let her keep the makeup after this and still let her do all her school camps and parties. The last I'd heard, her parents had started a B&B and made a couple of grand only to have it disappear because she found out their internet banking passwords, transferred it to herself, and then spent it on food, friends, and makeup all in one weekend before they could find out. Her punishment? Work it off by doing chores. It makes me sick. I had to do chores for free. I'm still doing chores for free in my own house. Fricking heck. I was in Toys R Us in the 90s. This mother and her daughter, who had to be around 12, were shopping. The girl asks if she can have some toy. The mother said, "No, we're here to get a gift for..." And the girl asked once or twice more and the mum declined. The girl then said, "F you, mummy," and took off running. The mother chased her, while the kid cussed her out. Eventually, it must have ended. I went to check out and the mother-daughter couple were behind me. The mother not only got the toy she wanted, but actually apologized to the daughter. That was my cousin Zach, but when we left Toys R Us, his dad made him give the toy to Salvation Army. He cried and I got yelled at for laughing. Okay, this is an opposite case, but it's a great counterpoint. I know a multi-millionaire chick, maybe 95 million in net worth. She's a friend of my ex-wife. We hang out with her on a semi-regular basis. At any rate, one day, years ago, my kid is playing some Game Boy DS shareable game with her sons. It's a game that my kid has. Her boys don't. They finally finish the game while the grown-ups are getting lit and eating way too much crab. One of her boys runs up to his mum and asks, "Can you get this game? It's really fun." She says, "Oh, money's tight. I'll tell you what, put it on your Christmas list. That's only a couple of months away, okay?" "Okay." And with that, all of the kids went downstairs to play whatever on the whatever device. I looked at her and said, "Money's tight?" She related the tale of how the kids have no idea that they have money. It was the way she was raised. She didn't discover the money until she graduated university. At first, she was teed off because her college could have been so much easier with money. But a few months after graduation, she started thinking back on how teed off she had been at the wealthy kids who just bought their way out of every problem that came their way, and how disgusted she had been at the way they lived their lives. She apologized to her dad and swore that she would raise her kids exactly the same way. She lives in a modest little house, and her boys wear sneakers until they destroy them. They will find out when they graduate college. Oh, this is one of my favorite spoiled kid comeuppance stories ever. I had a friend, Don, who had 2 kids, a year apart in age. When his son turned 16, Don was ready to give him his pristine Volkswagen. Don really babied his cars, so this Jetta, though about 7 years old, was truly in like-new condition. A car that most normal 16-year-olds would be thrilled to have. I would have been thrilled to have it myself. So Don tells his son the plan, and his dad goes, "Dad, I'm not driving that car. It's a 7-year-old Jetta. I need a new pickup truck." After taking a deep breath so he didn't throttle his son, Don simply said, "Well then, I'll drive the Jetta for 1 more year and give it to your sister when she's 16. If you want a new pickup truck, then you'll have to either ask your mother or buy one yourself." Now, Don and his kid's mother had been divorced for years, and through a series of bad choices, his ex-wife had barely 2 dimes to rub together. Don had gotten remarried to a woman who was very successful and a wealthy business owner. His son, very mistakenly, thought that Don and his current wife would foot the bill for whatever the son wanted. How very wrong he was. Fast forward a year, and his daughter was very happily driving around the Jetta. Don bought himself a brand new Mazda. His son has access to neither of them. In desperation, he bought himself a crappy $800 beater just to get himself to and from work. Lesson learned, I hope. I applaud Don for sticking to his guns and not teaching his kid to be an entitled butthole at an early age. A friend of mine is married to a very rich man. Old coal money or something. No one in the family has to work because they just live off investments. Anyway, she was crying one day because her mother-in-law was threatening to cut her husband's allowance and he might have to get a job. Cripes, I mean, don't get me wrong, I hate having to do stuff for a living sometimes, but having to do what the rest of the population does to continue your elevated style of living shouldn't be this much of a dream crusher. There are some follow-ons to this comment. I want to know what these people do all day. I can understand not bothering with a 9-to-5 if you're filthy rich, but there are only so many Lamborghinis to crash and so many expensive substances to absorb in one's lifetime. Charity and socializing, I suppose. I know a guy who had a few homes his family owned and he had no wife or kids or siblings. Actually, some of his siblings had died tragically. He's not filthy rich, just comfortable, and has at best to do some repairs and find good tenants. So he doesn't really work. The tragedies killed his drive. He spent all of his time reading and collecting books, and he bought so many off of Amazon that they just keep sending him books for free to review. You know, aside from the tragedies, that sounds peaceful. He has what he wants and probably doesn't need to worry about it. Can't imagine what he'd trade for his siblings back, though. I was on my high school's newspaper staff and we always did a section on cars in the parking lot, where we highlighted one crappy car and one super nice car, and then interviewed both owners. Everyone loved it, and don't worry, the crappy car owners were always super excited to be a part of it, and they always had the best stories. So we pick Snobette Snootyson because she's got a nice brand new Range Rover or something, and after I'm the last to call not it, I'm forced to interview her. What's your favorite feature of the car? Well, one time I forgot to put it in park and it started rolling away, but it didn't roll that fast, so probably that. Or my G-Easy bumper sticker. Have you got any funny stories about your car? Yeah, when my parents first got it for me, I was making faces at my friend and turned left when it wasn't an arrow and I totaled it, so they got me the same one again. I managed to sneak into the article. Snootyson has managed to keep her car undamaged since October. It was January when I wrote the article. When I turned 16, all I wanted for my birthday was to see the Blue Man Group perform. I saved my own money to pay for the ticket. I gave my mum the money, and I was really excited because my mum said she had the tickets and everything. My mum, my sister, and I all got in the car to go see the show. We arrived at the wrong place, and I immediately thought something was wrong. When I asked my mum why we were there, she said that my sister wanted to see O by Cirque du Soleil, so she just brought the tickets for that instead. I was so blown away that even though it was my birthday and my money, my sister had the final say over what we ended up doing. I refused to see the show and opted to walk through the casino the entire time instead. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'll throw out the disclaimer that the guy wasn't a jerk, he was actually okay, but the stunning privilege was both jaw-dropping and hilarious. A Hispanic guy in college came from a pretty wealthy family. He'd never had a job before, which isn't really that crazy for his age and being a student, though I'd been working all throughout college. One day he decided to get a job because he was bored and wanted to see what it was like. I forgot where he got a job at, but it was a pretty laid-back part-time job pushing paper in an office setting. A few weeks after starting, we were hanging out and he's talking about work. He reached into his pocket and says, "Today they gave me this. What am I supposed to do with it?" It was his paycheck. I stared at him for a second and said, "My man, that's your check." "What do you mean, what do I do with it? You deposit it in your bank." He says, "I don't know what to do with that. My dad just puts money in there. I don't look at it, I just take money out from ATMs or use my card." Not wanting to walk the poor idiot through such an easy process, I just tell him to take it to a grocery store and cash it. What he said next made me nearly fall off the couch in disbelief. He said, "What do you mean cash it? Like they'll just give me money for this?" Must be real nice to have that amount of wealth. My employer's two sons have everything paid for, so they never have to worry about cost. They both have everything they want and need. One of them likes expensive shiny things, and he's always thrown fits until he got what he wanted, from what his dad told me. For Christmas, he wanted a $1,200 55-inch Samsung curved TV, even after his dad stated that his budget was $1,000 each. Also, wow, he threw fits and got mad at his dad, and his dad, being the wimp that he is, apologized and ended up buying it for him anyway. The son is 21 years old. When my brother broke off one of the rearview mirrors on my father's nicest car 2 days before getting his license, driving illegally because he couldn't be bothered with the 5-minute walk to the store on a mild sunny day to get a can of soda. And then he just put the car in the garage like nothing happened, and my parents brought him a brand new motorcycle so that he wouldn't be tempted to borrow the car anymore. I may have been worse, but this was in my family, so When I was 15, I was dating this girl that I met at a coffee shop downtown. Her parents were loaded, like home movie theater wine cellar live-in maid loaded. The girl got a brand new Lexus for her 16th birthday. It took her 4 times to pass her driving test. A week later, she totaled the car, so they bought her another one. Her parents also flew her from California to London to go school clothes shopping. Went to school with a girl who got a 2012 BMW and literally cried and cussed out her parents because she didn't get a 2015. I knew one girl who got a hot pink Hummer for her quinceañera. Since she still had a year before she could drive, she decided to keep the Hummer for no apparent reason and got a Mercedes Roadster once she turned 16. Knew another girl who got a Mercedes G-Wagon for her 16th. She crashed it a week later on purpose because her stepdad bought it as an attempt to buy her love, and she caught him cheating on her mom. Don't know if that's exactly worth it. Recurring theme for the video is rich awful kids spurning more money than some grown hardworking adults have in their accounts just because they have no appreciation for money. So gross. In college, I knew a girl whose daddy was some big-shot banker or something, made enough that the wife didn't have to work and 3 kids could go to expensive schools with little financial aid. This girl didn't have to work during college and had all of her supplies and lodging paid for by daddy, and got to fly home every time there was a 3-day weekend, all on her father's dime. I once had to borrow $10 from her to pay for some food when we went out to eat. I promised I'd pay her back once I got my check next week. At the time, I worked for a cafe, and she seemed cool with it. Turns out she was not cool with it and promptly bashed me on her blog and to all her other friends, calling me a bad person and a thief. Because I borrowed $10, which I'd paid her back, by the way. I brought up the blog posts and she was very embarrassed. Last I heard of her, she's living in daddy-paid Manhattan apartment, working part-time as a receptionist at a yoga studio. She started a new blog about the struggle. Another instance, this was back in high school so the details are a little fuzzy, but there were 2 girls. One, the daughter of oil money, and the other, the daughter of a garbage truck corporation. They always tried to outdo each other. The oil money girl got a brand new Audi convertible when she got her license. Oh god, I knew the worst one. Big shot oil daddy, and she was the most insufferable human I've ever witnessed. Tried to brand herself as this super environmentalist hippie, but used all of her dad's oil money for weekly trips across the country, in private jets, with insane wardrobe and fancy dinners. I've never seen someone use money so frivolously while constantly social media preaching about all the earth has given her or whatever. Seriously, her Instagram posts are hilarious. An undressed picture of herself with her chest blurred out. As I'm soaked in the bright and glorious sun, I'm moved with gratitude. I give thanks for every part of my body for warrioring me through life and for simply being. Thank you, water. You are life. May we protect you as you do for us. For the past week, I've been deep in shadow. What a darker tone this is compared to the rose-gold clouds I normally drift in. I've leaned into the unknowns, and I've chosen to embrace it all. Pains, grace, peace. I am blissful. They just go on and on like that. Last I heard, she somehow convinced the school to let her do a special graduation program in Hawaii, and now her dad pays for her to live a gypset lifestyle, which if I understand correctly is just flying all over the world on insane dime, doing whatever you want? I was on a school bus as a senior. As we stopped at a house, there was a dead dog by the road. The little girl getting off said to her friend who pointed it out, "Oh yeah, we got him this weekend. My dad will just get me another one, so it doesn't matter." I'm from a rich area in Dallas, Texas, so I've seen some crap. I went back for a visit and my childhood best friend was complaining that her parents were only letting her go to New Zealand instead of Amsterdam. Again, her dad is a multimillionaire and both of her teenage brothers drive Teslas. My male best friend was complaining to me that he didn't get to go to prom in a Hummer limo, only a regular stretch limo. He looked like he was going to pass out when I told him that I missed prom in high school to work a night shift. I'm glad I don't know either of those guys anymore. New Zealand is awesome, so frick her, we don't need her here. Dated a girl who was given a brand new car for her 16th. She had it for a lot less than a year before she crashed it. Her parents brought her a used car. She had it for about another year before crashing it. They bought her a third car, used, and then when her brother turned 16, she pitched a fit because he got a new car while she had to drive around in her used car. So he ran her over, right? Last I heard, she went down on him. I'm not even kidding. I stopped hanging around that family about that time. She did it, and she told me she did it. As for the why, well, apparently she was bored. I don't know her personally, but I'm still friends with a guy who dated one of her friends. I heard this from him. We all went to a private, expensive school in the US. The spoiled, rotten girl got a degree in journalism and promptly moved to London to find a job. Her parents rented her an apartment and I assume paid for her life for about 2 years before she was forced to move back because she had neither looked for nor got a job while she was there. Once back in the States, she refused to live in her parents' house, citing she was a grown woman. How could this be expected of her? Her parents bought her an apartment in New York City. Last I heard, she still lives in that apartment without a job, but has moved because it's in crappy Brooklyn and not Manhattan. I'm an adult, guys. Now use your money to continue to support me in a new catered condo where I cannot lift a finger in peace. My mum had cervical cancer a few years ago and had a full hysterectomy. She was out of work for a while and my brother and I had to work more hours and basically help out with the majority of the bills and groceries. My then-girlfriend at the time couldn't seem to understand why I wasn't willing to pay hundreds of dollars on a tux and prom stuff. She proceeded to ask me every day if we were going until I finally yelled at her and told her sarcastically that I was sorry my mum had a terminal illness and surgery to remove all of it, and that I was sorry I had to help out with paying the bills. She finally shut up about it and cried to her friends, literally cried at the school she went to, but told them I just didn't want to go. She totally left out the part where my mum was ill. I only learned that the other week when one of the people she cried to got hired at my job and told me what she did. We later broke up because she cheated on me and told everyone I hit her. I've never been in a fight in my life and I'm afraid to hit anyone because I'm a wimp. I guess prom overrules helping my mum with her medical bills. Mum's been well for about 4 years now. The ex has moved on to have 2 babies and she's not even 22 yet. I dodged a bullet. Ugh, my friend's dog. He used to barbecue a steak for the dog once or twice a week. Apparently the dog didn't like it pan-fried. The only human food my cat eats is roast beef, and only when my mom makes it. My cooking? He screams for it, and then when I give him some, he looks at me like I'm trying to poison him. A friend of mine saved up for an iPod when they first came out. Literally saved for a year to get one. His mum took him and his sister to the mall so he could purchase this. His sister started throwing a tantrum because she didn't have one as well. Their mum got so fed up with her that she bought the sister one just to shut her up. I've been that, brother. It really does kill you inside. Just to make everyone feel good, I had a fist bump moment at the servo with a dad which started out rotten and turned awesome. His son wanted a Kinder Surprise and the dad said no. So the kid threw a Kinder Surprise on the ground and said, "Now you have to buy it." The teed-off dad pays for the said chocolate and waits for the kid to hold out his hand with a huge smile on his face before throwing it in the bin and dragging the now screaming kid back to the car. Most satisfying turnaround I've ever seen. When did someone try to force a "it's either me or them" choice, and how did it go? It's me or the business. I'd lost my very comfortable sales job and I wanted to try being a self-made man. After 4 years of covering all of our expenses, house, insurance, vehicles, vehicle insurance, groceries, vet bills, gas, utilities, and recreation, so that she could pay off her school loans, she was unwilling to cover our bills while I tried. I had a big enough severance to still cover our bills for nearly a year, and enough savings to use half of it to go in $15K with my brother on startup funds and still have $15K in the bank. She wouldn't even hear it, said I couldn't do it and that I'd fail. It's been 7 years. Last year, my brother and I made $350,000. I left her and didn't look back. Nothing feels better than being told you'll fail and then proving that you won't. Not my story, but a story of a bird we used to own. A large cockatoo that my mum brought for my dad. Truth is, the bird ended up loving my mum more than anything and would scream at everyone else and pick out its own feathers over stress while not being with my mum 24/7. I guess cockatoos can get really attached easily. Who'd have thunk it? Got so bad that my parents ended up giving the cockatoo away to some family acquaintance. The guy loved the bird and would walk around town with it on his shoulder and stuff. Eventually, he got a girlfriend, but after several months, the bird was being jealous and a bit of a C-word to the girlfriend. The girlfriend had finally had enough and told the guy, "It's me or the bird." The guy picked the damn bird. Actually, what probably happened with your mum and the bird is that the bird fell in love with your mum and was getting jealous or protective over her when others would approach. This happens because if you pet a bird anywhere else than its head, it mistakes the petting for love and affection, and it causes the bird to perceive the other as a mate. Look it up if you don't believe me. My ex-girlfriend said I had to decide between her or my cats. She lost. One of my cats had a reaction to meds for a toe abscess and chucked up in her shoes, and she went ballistic. They weren't even expensive shoes, but old ones that should have been in the bin ages ago anyways. She objected to the amount of money I was spending on vet bills, my money and not hers, by the way. We weren't living together and didn't share any bills or finances. I'd had that particular cat since I was a kid, so there was no contest. He finally died last year just short of his 26th birthday, lying in the arms of my current partner who spoiled him rotten. In short, love me, love my cats. 26 is an incredibly ancient feline. The oldest I knew was about 20 and that thing was the most frail animal I've ever met. A very well-preserved kitty. Follow-on comment? My husband's cat is a complete butthole. She has never consistently used a litter box and hates everyone but him in a hissing, biting sort of way. After a few years of living with me, she's finally accepted me as well and is only somewhat nice. However, he has had the cat since he was a kid, over 15 years now, and I would never ask him to give her up. We do come to compromises, like she mostly lives in a crate so she doesn't make the house a mess, but it's a huge crate with platforms and things to play with. He has to clean the crate, but we both get her out so she can run around and get attention. I know one day she's either going to pass on or get really sick. We're prepared and we have a plan in place of what we can afford, and at what point we have to let her go. My point is, if you marry a man with a cat, you marry the gosh darn cat too. I told them to choose between me or their substance use. They chose the substances. She told me it was her or my car. Not in the normal sense of she wanted me to sell it. Money for me at the time was tight. I wasn't struggling but couldn't afford many luxuries and needed new tires for my car, but she wanted to go on a shopping trip. When I say needed tires, the fronts had turned into slicks. When I said I couldn't afford to give her money because I needed to put it into my car and explained to her it was a huge safety issue, she gave me an ultimatum. I chose my car and safety. My ex-wife once asked me to pick between her and our daughter. I told her she'd lose, and she ended up getting the help she needed with the postnatal depression. Good man. Also, that's great that she got help. Explain, please. Why was she wanting you to choose? I understand she had depression, but what exactly was she asking for? She either wanted to leave or for us to give up our daughter for adoption. She felt incapable of being a parent, and even after treatment, she didn't really bond with our daughter for several years. My dad's girlfriend witnessed me being bullied and mistreated by her brother and denied it for years. I told my dad it's me or her. I don't have contact with my father anymore. My dad came over and told me to choose between my fiancée and mother of my child or my family. I'm now married with 3 beautiful children and couldn't be happier. I still occasionally hear from my parents, but we rarely respond. I'm not the one missing out on my kids' lives, not my problem. To expand, my dad hates my wife for unknown reasons. He's made up every excuse in the book, from she's too picky to she's the reason I don't go to church. My family didn't start going to church till I was in 8th grade, and I stopped going sophomore year. I didn't meet my wife till junior year. He is selfish and has called my kids stupid. The last time I went out to dinner with them, he told me this great story about how he was telling a waitress that she should be my wife, and that there was just the small problem of my current wife, but she could be gotten rid of. He's just an awful guy who's really great at hiding his true persona from the rest of the world. I see through his BS and he puts on a front to make everyone think I'm the butthole for not seeing him anymore. My wonderful in-laws have more than filled in for their absence. He also hates them and is rude to them. He told another waitress that I was dating some awful bride of Satan bimbo. Turns out that waitress has known my wife for 15 years. My wife is one of the nicest, sweetest people that I've ever met. She goes out of her way to accommodate others. My dad has basically convinced all of my local aunts and uncles and cousins that we're terrible people, so I never get invited to family events. So in short, Dad is a prick, my wife is not. I have 3 beautiful kids and I don't give an F about him. Either we open up our relationship or I'm breaking up with you. We opened our relationship and she broke up with me anyway. I need to test drive all the cars or that one car on the lot I like the look of before I sell the car I own right now. Can I do that for a few months? That's usually what ultimatums about open relationships mean. I'm not even against them, but people are seriously dishonest as frick a lot of the times they ambush people with them out of nowhere. When I was 4, my dad decided to buy pulped orange juice. I took one sip and was disgusted by the pulpy bits. My mum usually bought pulp-free for me. I told my dad I hated it, but he refused to get rid of it. I told him it was me or the orange juice. Next day, I came into the kitchen and in the fridge is a container of high-pulp orange juice. My dad walked in and told me I needed to get better at picking my fights. It's been almost 15 years and even when I come home he makes sure there's a bottle of extra high-pulp OJ in the fridge now. Joke's on him, now I actually like it. That's definitely one of the more lighthearted stories in this grouping. Also, I'm not sure if the joke is on your dad. It kinda sounds like he won. Anyone in the comments agree? I once had a best friend and a girlfriend who hated each other. While my girlfriend hated the dude, she encouraged me to be friends with him. The guy couldn't stand her so much he put me in the position where I had to choose one and say goodbye to the other. I've been married to the girl for 10 years and never talked to the guy anymore. Easy choice, much happier this way. I can't imagine having a guy friend give me an ultimatum over a girl. What the heck is wrong with him? We had a drummer, Scott, tell the rest of the band that it was him or me. They kept me and we renamed the band Scott Free. It's either me or the beard. You'd better believe that I kept that beard. Not so much for the sake of the beard itself, but because making that kind of trivial ultimatum is a major red flag. Fun fact, the man with the world's longest recorded beard died when he stepped on his beard by accident and broke his own neck. I've legitimately heard someone on my team break up with a girl during a game of Dota on voice. He was using open mic and she was like, "Get off that stupid game, take me out to dinner," in this horribly entitled voice. After about 10 minutes of him being calm and saying things like, "It's okay, baby, just let me finish this game, I'll get punished if I leave," and her just not understanding, she issued an ultimatum. "If you don't turn off that game right now and take me out to dinner, I'm leaving." And he just typed in chat, "Pause please, need to break up with my girlfriend." And everyone lolled and he paused and the guy just went fricking ballistic, like, "This is my apartment, you stay here on my dime, I buy you all your food, I give you money to go shopping. You don't get to issue ultimatums to me when you don't have crap without me. Get the frick out of my apartment, this relationship is over." Then it was lots of her crying and yelling and bringing up all this crap he did wrong in the past, as if that was going to help, and eventually he just said, "Sorry, relationship's over, I don't care. Bring a truck and one of those D-bag bar guys you love to go home with so much to get your stuff tomorrow. See if any of them are willing to clothe, feed, house, and do the deed with you." And everyone on chat just went, "Whoa!" And we were typing everything that was happening to the enemy team. He eventually got her out of the apartment and boy did it sound like the guy had a world of pressure off his shoulders. After the game ended, I befriended him. We still talk on Steam sometimes. He really ended the relationship and ended up just putting all of her crap in a storage locker when she didn't come to get it for a week. He has a new girlfriend now who apparently isn't as awful. She made me choose to obey her every whim or she'd leave. Turns out it was a power play. I called her bluff. I chose life. My crazy girlfriend said I was obsessed with my GameCube and said she'd leave if I kept it and the games or sell it and she stays. Currently, I'm living a happy life with my GameCube, controllers, games, and my other consoles and games. I don't know what happened to her. Was her name Sega Saturn? I worked at a care facility where I couldn't keep my own personal cell phone on me, but would carry around a work phone as I worked with clients. My friends and family all knew that I was pretty unreachable when I was at work because of this, but for some reason my boyfriend couldn't understand it. He'd get annoyed at me for not responding to his texts or calls to the point he'd drive by and make sure my car was at work. He once left me a voicemail implying that he intended to self-delete since I wasn't there for him. He insisted in the message that I had to choose between him or my job. After I got him checked out, I broke things off as gently as possible. It wasn't so much that I had my dream job, but more that we didn't have an emotionally healthy relationship for him and his possessiveness was going to kill him. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Boyfriend wanted me to move in but was allergic to cats. He said I could either prove I loved him and was ready for an adult relationship by getting rid of my cats, or we were done. We'd only been dating for 4 months. I tried to explain that throwing out pets I'd had since high school was a jerk move that I wasn't willing to make after a few months. He said I was a silly child who loved useless, disgusting animals more than humans. We were done. I suppose it's hard to empathize with a cat if all they bring you is problems and itchiness. I'd hate life too if I couldn't pet any animal within reason. I tolerated even having the conversation because he told me he was allergic, which is a valid reason to have qualms about pets, but by the end I don't even think he was allergic. Just a jerk trying to pull a power maneuver. Years later, it turns out I'm allergic to cats. I laughed in my doctor's face when he told me to get rid of them. A girlfriend once told me I had to become a Christian or we could break up. We broke up shortly after that. Yeah, she would have to be a terrific lay to make me want to lie to myself like that, and ironically, knowing that she was that good at doing the deed would raise questions about the degree of her faith to the religion I was joining. Paradox. When I was 16, I got home from school, early release from my last block. My father was upstairs, in my bed, drunk, bottle in hand, and passed out. He woke up, and calmly I asked him to get up and take a shower, or I'm out. He told me to go and F myself and proceeded to drink while talking and arguing with himself over some alcoholic, delusional bullcrap. Completely forgot my presence. I packed some stuff and called my very dear childhood friend to come get me. Her and her mother helped me buy a Greyhound ticket to get out of state to my sister's. About 6-hour drive to the south, but a horrible 12-hour bus drive. I phoned my sister when I was an hour away, talked to my mum as she begged me to return. I emancipated shortly after and spent a year with my sister working and getting crap done. Only thing I regret is being the youngest while all my siblings moved out in a similar vein. I was the last resort for my dad's bullcrap. When I left, he focused on my mum. Things were always absolutely terrible for all of us, but since he no longer had a selection to choose from, the only person he could bully was her. She passed away 2 years ago from melanoma after a long, grueling few sick years stuck alone with him before moving out. I came back around and aided and took care of her during treatments and sickness until the day she passed. But still, man, I regretted leaving him alone to destroy her mentally and physically. Double-edged sword, I guess. Glad I left to save myself from that situation, but I still can't forgive myself for letting her go through that alone. One of my best friends said if you end up with her, we're done. He didn't like my girlfriend, and that was his good right. But try to force my hand and you'll have another thing coming to you. I've done that to my best friend. I'm talking best friends since diapers, like a brother to me. He was starting things up with this girl who had a reputation. Substance problems, restraining orders, stealing from everyone around her, that sort of crap. I told him that if he was going to trust me on anything, it had to be this. Luckily, he chose me. She's now in jail for trying to kill one of her boyfriends. Not me, but my husband. His ex-fiancée is allergic to dogs and refuses to take medications her doctor suggested. She told him, "It's me or the dog." His dog is his number one love. He chose the dog. I'm really happy because then we met and I love dogs. So it's us, our 2 dogs and 2 kids, living happily ever after. College roommates agreed I could get a cat and then they changed their minds. The cat was behaved and used her litter box. They didn't give a reason but said she had to go. I moved out. It's either me or your dogs. I chose my pups. No regrets. My ex-boyfriend said it was him or my dog. He refused to move into my place if he was living there too. I chose my dog. He was potty trained and overall a good dog, but he didn't like my boyfriend and therefore my boyfriend didn't like him. My mum gave my biological dad's mum the ultimatum of either going to rehab and getting clean so she could see me when I was born or choose her smack. Needless to say, I have no relationship with my dad or his mum. Some guy I was seeing told me I wasn't ladylike enough. He said I swore too much, announced when I had to pee, called him dude, and generally acted like a guy. I guess he wanted me to change, but I dumped him instead. I met a chick that acts just like you. 10 out of 10 would marry again. Well, crap. Find me a man who thinks like you. There are dozens of us. Literally dozens. I gave my former boss an ultimatum once. I could either have a vacay or I'd turn in my keys. I hadn't had a single day off in over a year and worked nights, weekends, and holidays. I got the vacay. I pulled that once. My grandmother offered to pay for a trip to Europe to make up for past offenses. Never missed a single day of work. Was never late, always worked overtime. Hadn't even asked for a raise in 2 years. The plant was going to be shut down for a week and a half during Christmas, and I wanted an extra week and a half after that break, unpaid of course. I asked for that in August. He delayed until October when I said I was going and just needed to know if I'd have a job when I got back. I had a job when I got back. Not me, but a mate and I were playing Warhammer 40k. His girlfriend was there being bored. They wandered off and she gave him the ultimatum. It's either 40k or her. He came back in and she didn't. What is a mere mortal woman compared to the glory of serving the God Emperor of mankind? I can kind of get this actually. At this point, I have such a critical mass of wargaming miniatures and terrain that giving up my hobbies means losing or at least selling literal thousands of dollars worth of stuff. Regardless of whether she was worth it, it's just such a hassle to give a major hobby that you've had for years up. Also, who would force me to give up something that brings me so much joy? I've had 2 superiors tell me that if my wife ever told me to choose between the military and her, pick the military. You being home more often will aggravate the problems you have, not fix them. Source? They're both divorced now. I've always stood by, if you're the one that makes me choose, then you're the one that goes. I told my best friend she could either hang out with her new friend or me, but she couldn't do both. Her new friend was a mentally unstable former roommate of mine who attacked and threatened everyone in that apartment with a knife before being committed to hospital for several months. As soon as she was released, she came back to school, found me and my friend, and became fixated on spending time with my friends and going to the school clubs that I went to. My best friend told me that anyone who dared give her an ultimatum like that didn't deserve to be in her life. I just shrugged and explained that her new buddy put me in therapy and I was considering a restraining order. I was sorry, but I wasn't willing to allow that girl back to my life. She threw a fit about how dare I say something so manipulative. She spent the next week trying to trick or force me into going to social events where both of them would be. I went no contact with both of them. A year later, my former best friend tracked me down to apologize, that she didn't know how crazy and mean my old roommate could be. She wanted to patch up our friendship, but by that point I didn't trust her anymore. That's pretty lethal to any relationship. A few years back, my mother said if I continued dating my girlfriend, it was proof I hated her. I guess I must secretly hate my mum because I ended up staying with my girlfriend, now wife, who is a saint and is literally loved by everyone else in my life. I didn't mention that my mother has severe issues, but perhaps you could figure that out. Needless to say, I don't come around very often. I was at this party a couple of years ago in the backyard in the city, and everyone got quite wasted. We were out on the street as well. When this group of kids, 10 to 12 years of age, came up and threw water balloons, yeah, I know, at us, and some of those that didn't explode we threw back at them, which obviously made them mad. An hour or so later, I came into the backyard from the toilet downstairs, when I saw almost everyone from the party gathered up, and then one of the big brothers to these kids, around 25 years old, we were 16, had his hand on this girl's face and was pushing her up against a wall. And obviously, I wasn't just going to stand around doing nothing, so I pushed the guy away, and as he started to leave, he flew back and threw a forceful punch right at my face. So I went out for a few seconds and stumbled back. I had this liquor bottle in my hand. All I could think of was smashing it against that fricking idiot's head. And I started approaching him when my crying girlfriend, who witnessed everything, came up and blocked me, and obviously, as drunk and mad as I was, I kept saying that I wanted to smash him with that fricking bottle, and that's when she said it was either her or the fight. And obviously, I knew she said it to keep me out of trouble, and I loved her, so I picked the first. I had a friend who was saving me, even though she had a boyfriend, and chasing off girls who showed any interest. I started dating someone without telling her, and was given the choice between her, my at the time best friend, and my new girlfriend. Needless to say, choosing my girlfriend was the best decision of my life. We're still dating 4 years later and are as happy as an oyster. I have one real hobby, a live-action RP, full-contact boffer sport called AmITheA. Every weekend, about 40 or 50 of my friends and I get together and hit nerds with sticks. AmITheA was my only social interaction and is a damn good workout to boot. The girlfriend got jealous of me skipping out for 5 hours every Sunday. "I don't think there's room in your life for AmITheA and me," she said. "Oh, honey, I don't think you're going to like where this conversation is heading." What was the strangest way you've seen someone quit? My boss, in retail, called me into work for noon and was showing me how to check the company email and set alarm codes for the doors, and then gave me the password to his company BlackBerry. This was strange, and then when the regular guy came to start his shift at 1, he closed the store and came out with all his stuff and said, "I'm officially done with this company as of right now." The phone started to ring and I reached to grab it, knowing this was the district manager, and not wanting to confront him, he literally ran out of the store and I haven't seen him since. Apparently, he had just emailed the district manager to say he'd resigned and wanted no further contact. The other guy and me have only worked at the store for a month. Not my story, but my boss's. She worked at a very busy downtown restaurant and brunch spot, and the line would be flooded with tickets for hours on end. One day, one of the line cooks just stopped amidst all of the commotion, stood up straight, paused, grabbed all of the tickets off the line, scrunched them into a ball and put them in his pants. He then put his middle fingers up, rotated to face everyone who was watching in horror, and walked out. This has since become one of my favorite stories. Holy crap, working as a chef in a cafe that can get busy, just the thought of all the tickets being gone horrifies me. I used to work at a fast food place in a small town. We had the run-of-the-mill, so-and-so was arrested, guess he's not working here anymore, happen more times than I could count. But the best was when someone didn't show up for his shift. The manager calls his phone and he doesn't answer. It goes to voicemail. He changed his greeting to the following: "F you, I quit." Talking about co-workers arrested, back in the 80s I was working midnights. We had a co-worker turn to us at shift's end and tell us, "It's been a pleasure working with you. Turn and walk away." When we called after him asking if he'd quit, he said, "Not exactly," and went out the door. We asked the boss what was up and he had no idea. That evening he was on the news for robbing a bank and then being caught minutes later strolling down the street with the money. Turns out he had acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And back then, most treatments were experimental. The company insurance didn't cover treatment, but he had read that people in prison were getting treatment for that disease, so he did what he felt he had to do. That is quite the workaround. I'm not sure that prison inmates were prioritized for that treatment. Correct me if I'm wrong, comments. My high school summer job was at Burger King. One year they put me on the schedule when I was supposed to be at sports camp, 6 hours away, and I said, "No, like I told you 3 months ago, I need those 2 weeks off." And they replied with, "Well, you have to come back to work, then just go back to camp." And I was like, "Okay." So I drove back home and quit. When I got home, there was a manager on the phone for me saying that they have a no quitting policy. I was like, "Okay, well, I quit, so…" followed by awkward silence. Then she hung up on me. We walked a guy we'd fired down to security, and he hugged the old security guard for like 10 minutes in silence. I was once giving a course at a company HQ in a room overlooking the front door. I was just explaining company law for engineers when the entire IT department left the building with their belongings in black plastic bin bags. Since it was IT department, maybe they were outsourced? My first IT job out of college was in a large call center for a large bank. I worked there less than 2 months and wasn't even done with their training program when they took me and the other 15 people that were training with me into a room and said, "We don't need you anymore." So security escorted all of us at once to the door. I had a guy who worked for me who was awesome at his job but believed in just about every conspiracy imaginable. He would go on vacation and people would ask where he was going and he'd say, "Nowhere. I just need more time to work with my magnets." He'd forward all kinds of stuff about big business suppressing technology, crappy internet videos of people who claimed they had built perpetual motion machines, and other things. Sometimes we'd try to point out the flaws in these theories, but mostly we just laughed it off. One morning I came into work and started unpacking my laptop to get started, and he burst into my office with a huge smile and said, "I'm giving ya my 2-week notice." I started to speak and he cut me off. "I double-checked everything last night and I've achieved over-unity. I just needed a different kind of magnet. That was my key. I'm out of here in 2 weeks. I wanted to resign right away, but my girlfriend said that the polite thing to do was give 2 weeks notice. I guess the world can wait another 2 weeks." I tried to talk him down, but he was insistent. Over the next 2 weeks, he continued to work diligently on his remaining tasks, but he had a perpetual smile on his face and declared loudly to anyone who asked that, "I've solved the world's energy problems," and that, "This is a revolutionary game changer." Someone joked that something this radical might put his life in danger, and he responded, "I've taken steps to ensure that if anything happens to me, my invention will still get out to the general public." His last day was almost identical to anyone else's last day at the company they resigned from, only he acted like the happiest person in existence. 3 months later, I got an email from him that was entirely in lowercase letters and looked like it was written by a completely different person. It was something like, "Hi, I was wondering if my position had been filled. If not, I was wondering if I could have it back. There's something wrong with my device. I think it's the magnets, and I don't have enough money right now to fix it. I need a job, thanks." His position had been filled. I tried going through finance to get another position opened because, all crazy aside, he was good at this job. But the vice president of development shot it down when it came to him in the approval chain because he didn't want employees to think they could leave and still have a job to come back to whenever they wanted. This was at a restaurant. The general manager of the place was fired for being a scumbag, pervert, moron. After he was escorted to his car, he drove back to the front of the restaurant, got out, ran to the grassy area and started pulling up handfuls of grass and throwing them at the windows, whilst screaming like a burnt child. I used to manage the tech support side of a call center for an ISP. I had one tech come in and put a 6-pack of beer on my desk and said, "That's that," and walk out crying. Crying? I usually only do that on my way into work. I do it at work, for efficiency's sake. My supervisor used to tell everyone at my last job they were easily replaceable. He was a former military guy and he tried to run the place military style. He'd threaten people, break stuff, and make unreasonable demands. So one day I found a new job and just quit without notice. He got a hold of my number and the next day he called me and yelled at me for being unprofessional. He said I owed him 2 weeks. I told him I'm easily replaceable and he should have no problem finding a replacement, and then I hung up. I should also mention that job had the bare minimum amount of employees to run the place. If someone called out, we'd all have to work at least 2 hours overtime to make up for it. If anyone took a week vacation, it was a nightmare. My quitting like that set the place back a few months until they hired and trained a new guy to replace me. Yeah, there's a difference between a rifle grunt and a specialist. I'm guessing the supervisor was probably in the front-line infantry to have gotten that idea. It's a long story, but our manager wrote up me, my friend, and literally everyone else who had worked that day because she thought someone stole $20 from her. My friend and I decided to quit because I'm not going to sign a write-up when I did nothing wrong and she's too stupid to lock her stuff up. I took the paper, simply wrote "I quit" and handed it back to her. I looked at my friend and he looks right at her, just staring at her. Then he slowly crumples up the write-up, puts it in his mouth and starts chewing, just staring at her. He turns around, walks to his car and drives away, still the whole time with the paper in his mouth. It was glorious. I had a friend who worked as a night baker. One night they wrote him up for being disorderly. They were sitting down at one of the tables in the dining area and they slide him the paper. He threw the paper in the air and shouted, "Nope," and then just went back to baking. They didn't fire him and he didn't quit. I don't know how he got away with it. I ran away after quitting. I was hired by a competing company, put in my 2 weeks and the boss got suspicious. He came by my desk and told me to follow him into his office to sign a non-competition form, basically saying that after I left there I couldn't work for the competition for 6 months. I was crapping my pants as I got up to follow him. At that exact moment, the phone rang. I picked it up and told him I'd be there in 5 minutes. I finished up the phone call, grabbed my stuff and hauled it out the back door. They eventually did find out that I went to work for the competition and sent me an email saying, "Congrats on the new job. I'll have to stop by for a visit one of these days." Why would anyone sign something like that? If they didn't make you do it when you were hired, why would you do it when you're about to quit? What are they going to do? Fire you? After you've quit? I don't understand the scenario at all. I worked my way up from someone with no responsibility to running a department. Along the way, no one thought to make me sign one. The main reason I went looking for a new job was because they were doing mass layoffs. After they tried to fire my buddy, they asked him to sign one, which he then informed them was illegal and told them to go F themselves. This happened at the casino my friend worked at. She's standing there dealing blackjack, normal day. All of a sudden, the dealer on the next table over screams, "Blackjack! I win!" while dancing and pumping both fists into the air. His players are dumbfounded. After his victory dance, he reaches out with both hands and scoops up everything on the table. Everything. Yeah, that too. If it was on the table, it got scooped up into his bank. Cards, chips, lighters, all of the money the players had sitting on the table in front of them, even the money that wasn't being wagered. After he scoops it all up, he rips off his ID badge, throws it down on top of the pile and walks off the table, out of the pit, and out the front doors to where his friend was in the car waiting. It took surveillance hours and hours to find out whose money belonged to whom. After the fact, she found out that the guy's friend had been waiting out there since the beginning of his shift. It had taken him hours to deal himself a blackjack. In short, casino employees like to go down in flames. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Worked at a very fancy French restaurant. The chef was a master chef and thus he had the biggest ego of anyone I'd ever met. Chef was in the piano bar talking and having a drink with some horse racing bigwigs, Rancho Santa Fe during track season. Hard-working, mild-mannered busser is changing tablecloths. The chef just starts belittling him in front of everyone for a laugh. "What the hell, man? I just saw a bit of the table when you switched cloths." You're not supposed to see the actual table. "If you grabbed the wrong size tablecloth, fold it back up. Man, you're so damn lazy." There are a lot of different sizes, so you grab a variety and use it on the next table if it was wrong. The chef said something else and laughs with a jockey, some hot women and some guys with back pockets thicker than George Costanza. I forget what he said that made everyone laugh, but this 20-year-old behemoth of a busser takes his apron off and throws it at the chef. The chef stands up from the booth like he's teed off and is yelling about how he'll lose his job. The busser goes, "Frick this job and frick you, you little turd," and decks the chef right in the chops in the middle of the busy piano bar, then walks to the back exit, grabs a tray full of buffed Rydell stemware, and chucks it into the wall and leaves. It was pretty rad. A terrible ex-coworker, Crazy K, told everyone except his boss that it was his last day. His boss, a real nice guy, eventually heard what was going on and walked over to him and asked if it were true. Crazy K simply said, "Yep," and stood up and walked out. This guy had serious white snow problems. Not sure where he is now, but I kinda miss the shenanigans, and I hope he's found help. Other stories include continually complaining about being underpaid. He was making 6 figures, which is above average for the position and skill level experience. To illustrate his poorness, he would loudly count coins at his desk by dumping handfuls onto it and sliding them one by one into his hand. This was performed multiple times daily. It was the best for the company, but Crazy K was my primary source of entertainment at work. He would bring girlfriends, very trashy-looking working girls, to our upscale holiday parties. He got 2 of them pregnant, proposed to both, they each took the ring and ran off to southern states and sued him for child support. One of the previously mentioned working ladies at a holiday party was named La Fonda. Yes, seriously. This was about 2 years after Napoleon Dynamite came out and everyone was laughing about it. On a whim, he bought 2 brand new cars in a week, but had to sell them both about a month later. He picked up another lady of the night at a work event using Craigslist on his BlackBerry. Was quite proud of this. I mean, I've had this kind of coworker without the overt wealth. They're very entertaining, if nothing else. I'd planned to quit a job once, and it just didn't take. I picked up a 3rd job at a cafe during undergrad that required me to be in at 6:30 a.m. I thought I could do it. I gave it a try for a few weeks, but it was quickly becoming apparent that I liked drinking and sleeping in on Saturday a whole lot more than the extra cash. Anyway, I woke up hungover in a beautiful girl's bed and decided, screw it, I'm not going in, and went back to bed. I know, I should have called, but I was 20 and working 2 other jobs in addition to taking courses full-time. When I woke up again at around 9, I had a couple of voicemails. I expect "don't bother coming in again, we'll make your last check" message, but instead it's the owners apologizing because my coworker had been attacked and mugged on their way to work, and they figured I must have shown up already, seen the closed cafe and just gone home. I didn't have the heart to tell them, so I went in the next day, worked, and gave notice. 2 managers, one who looked like Ross Perot and the other who looked like John Candy, were leading a meeting when the police came in and arrested them. Turns out they took a trip together to the next town over and beat a working girl nearly to death. Worked in a supermarket as a cashier when I was in high school. A few of my good chums also worked there as well. Cue the crazy lady who goes to my friend who's having a rough day to begin with at the register behind me, puts all of her crap up and he brings her up. She notices a lobster has somehow gone missing and accuses my friend of stealing it. Then he says, "Lady, are you kidding me? Why would I take a lobster?" She then proceeded to yell at him and demands compensation in some form. He's had enough and yells, "F this crap, I'm out. Lady, F you and your lobster." He proceeded to walk out of the store and punches a hole in the wall, knocking a display shelf over as he exits, with her wide-eyed and a silent store behind him. Turns out her lobster was left at the seafood counter. I had to fire an employee after I caught her sleeping in her cubicle multiple times, and then telling me that asking her to assist in other areas when we were slow was not her job. Her mum came in afterwards and came storming into my office in a huff. Picture this: a 40-year-old black woman in pretty good shape in skin-tight leopard leggings with gigantic gold high heels on, oversized sunglasses and cornrows in her hair, screaming at me, "You're just a freaking racist. I'm gonna send my lawyer at you and he's going to sue your butt. We got racial discrimination suit on our hands." I looked at her the whole time and never said a freaking word. After which she stormed out of the building screaming, "You're all a bunch of freaking racist N-words in here." My first job out of college was at a medium-sized company with a small IT staff. There were just 6 of us programmers until we hired the new guy. We were using this obscure language which you couldn't really hire for without paying through the nose, so they decided to do on-the-job training for this. So the new guy was a little older than me but had no experience outside of teaching. He was nice, sort of quiet and a bit quirky. The only personal thing he kept on his desk was this plastic goat. I didn't have anything on my personal desk either, so I didn't really think anything of it. Sometimes he would play with it a little, but it mostly just sat on one spot in his desk. Everyone needs some sort of stress relief, I suppose. A few weeks go by and the new guy seems to be picking up the language fair enough. He had coded a couple of screens, albeit with a little help. One Monday comes up and he doesn't show at the office. Our boss calls him and says you can't just not show up without calling. Not a big deal to me, I mean things come up, it was just a little unprofessional. The next morning I get into the office super early, which is unlike me since I'm such a late riser. He rolls in around his normal time and is surprised to see me, but I figure it's because he likes the quiet morning. We're there working for a couple of hours and the whole time he's fiddling with the goat in his hand. Mid-morning he gets up out of his chair and leaves our little room. An hour goes by and I figure out he isn't around for lunch, which we all used to do as a group. I figure he must have had something to do. Well, he doesn't show up after lunch. The next day, no call, no show. A weekend passes and still he doesn't show and he hadn't returned any calls. So my boss had to call the police to do a health check on him. He literally sends an email saying he wouldn't be back. We all look at each other thinking, who in the world quits like that? Was this a spur of the moment or premeditated thing? We look at his desk and realize his little plastic goat is gone. He must have come in that morning to grab it, but was surprised by me into staying for a bit to cover it up or something. He hadn't done anything malicious to the code, he just wanted his goat. A guy I knew got an email for a meeting in the boss's office. Figuring he was screwed, he starts just destroying computer equipment, just messing stuff up like crazy. So he goes into the office, sits down, and the boss tells him he needs to go to a conference someplace and it'd be all paid for by the company. He didn't get to go to the conference. My previous company was so awful that we'd get new employees sometimes that would get the vibe very quickly and quit within the first few days. But the classic was the guy who never came back from his lunch break on the first day. Within his group in our company, his name, Greg, became a verb meaning to quit at lunch and never come back. So occasionally you'd hear a frustrated employee saying, "That's it, I'm doing a Greg." I wonder if my name is used for its infamy to imply any activity in a circle I'm unaware of. I just kind of love that Greg probably has no idea that he left such a legacy in a workplace he didn't even spend a full day in. I have two stories, one normal and the other not so normal. The first was a bus guy at Red Lobster that had had enough on a Friday night. He was in the middle of cleaning a table. Nobody was talking to him, nobody was yelling, and nobody had had any confrontation with him all night. Suddenly, he stood up and yelled, "F this place!" Took off his apron, threw it across the room, and walked out the door. Never saw him again. The weird one was a guy at a place I worked where we had unlimited internet access. A lot of people would Facebook or whatever. Turns out this guy was trolling chat rooms for underage girls. He left for lunch to meet one at a mall, and it wasn't a young girl but a bunch of cops. They took him and then came and took the computer he worked on. My ex-girlfriend used to be a pizza delivery driver for the chain pizzeria. One day her boss was giving her guff and she said she quit. The manager said she needed to bring her uniform in. She promptly took off her shirt, threw it at him, she was wearing underclothes, and then walked out, through a restaurant full of families and customers. I worked at a bowling alley and me and another guy did all the legwork for the bar, bringing out the food, collecting bear cups, delivering the beer, among other things. The old lady bartender never split a dime with us. She hoarded all of the tips despite only filling the cups. We didn't like it, so I mentioned it to the manager girl on duty. She wasn't a very good manager and couldn't handle situations. Her big solution was, "If you don't like it, take off your shirt." So without really batting an eye, I took off my shirt, put it on the table, and walked out. A few days later, the person above her called me in to apologize, give me my last paycheck, and offered to let me stick around. I didn't, but as a nice consolation, I learned they started paying the other guy doing the same work a little extra, and he started making a portion of the tips. Screw that greedy old banshee, though. After 25 years as an executive with a fairly large corporation, I threw the keys to my company car and my company credit card on the CEO's desk and walked home. Started my own business 4 months later and just retired after 19 successful and blissful years. My friend quit his job at a corner store by just walking out and never coming back. Before he left, he stashed an open gallon of milk on top of the radiator that hung from the ceiling. What are the strangest things you've overheard while chauffeuring the rich? Billy Bob Thornton was doing radio press for a movie about to come out, meaning he had to stop by 6 or 7 radio stations for interviews. He wanted to have a cigarette in the vehicle on the way to the next interview, but I had to let him know that our company has a no-smoking policy in our vehicles. He asked me to call the owner to make an exception, but the owner said no, and it's a $250 cleaning fee if he smoked in the vehicle. He asked to stop by a bank. Came out and handed me $5,000 in cash and said, "Here's for the whole goddamn pack." He smoked in the car for the rest of the trip. Later, I got up the nerve to ask him if that's the most expensive pack of cigarettes he'd ever smoked. All he said was, "Not even close." Never explained it further. I think about him often. Picked up a wedding party. Bride, bridesmaid, and bride's boyfriend who was paying for the wedding. They had a magnum of champagne and we drove around for quite some time while they snorted white snow in the back. They were using rolled up 50s and 20s, then tossing them to me in the front seat as tip money. I dutifully brushed off each bill and added them to my wallet, pretending not to know what was going on. The couple argued off and on about showing up to the wedding. Apparently, she felt weird about getting married and he was trying to convince her it was a good idea. Finally dropped them off at the church and he slipped me a matchbook with his name and number written on it. Yeah, it was the late 80s and I was a young woman, one of the only female limo drivers at the time in that city. I scored a sweet leather jacket with the tips from that night. So many weird stories. And to clarify, the bride's boyfriend and the groom were not the same person. A chauffeur I knew ended up driving around some big stars. He was a big guy, like 6'8" and super muscular. His best story was when he was driving around a few WWE, or WWF back then, stars, and they awkwardly asked him not to get out and open the door for them because he'd make them look smaller.
I'd totally believe this. The WWE had an on-air personality named Tom Phillips that was like 6 foot. In order to make the wrestlers seem bigger when he was interviewing them, they always had him sitting down, or if they were standing, they were framed from the waist up to hide the fact that Tom was standing with his feet spread out. And this is why the narrator only goes out to the clubs with a squad of short kings. I'm going to digress slightly from the topic to bring up another story that was written to us, not about people in limos, but their close cousins, people who go to country clubs. I once worked at a really exclusive club in Massachusetts, the kind you have to be born into or have generational wealth to be voted into membership by the board. Drew Barrymore was a frequent guest, and there was always a lot of tension between her and her ex, who always came with his extremely young new girlfriend and wife. She wasn't super friendly, no one was supposed to acknowledge they recognized her, and seemed constantly stressed. I felt kind of bad for her. Didn't seem like a fun life. Mitt Romney, Morgan Freeman, and a bunch of big-time athletes were also frequent guests. Someone got married at our club and spent over $2 million on the wedding. They flew out the event planners for Coachella to design every aspect of the wedding. It was a spectacular one, and one of the most fun nights I've ever had. However, at the end of the night, the front desk saw the groom go home with one of the bridesmaids instead of the bride. I helped set up and cater this one member's garden party, a casual affair for them that must have cost tens of thousands. They had a well-known music group come play for their guests, and I got to play cornhole with said group during the luncheon, which was pretty cool. So many wealthy kids with rich kid problems and wildly different upbringings. Parents would constantly talk and quiz their kids on politics, history, science, among other things. One group of guys was challenging their teenage sons to come up with a business idea. The boy with the best idea would receive $1 million for startup costs. Kids talked stocks constantly at the dinner table. Teenagers would come to eat with their friends, drink, and drop a casual 15 grand bill on their parents' tab. Just such a stark contrast from the way I was raised, where money was a taboo topic and my weekly $2 allowance for a week's worth of chores made me feel rich. It was a small island with an equally small nightlife, so for fun we'd grab a drink and an ice cream cone and hop on the yachts and sailboats parked at the docks. We'd just explore and pretend we were sailors or captains for the night. Once we hopped on Johnny Depp's super yacht while he was out for dinner. We actually managed to hang out for a hot minute before security finally kicked us off. While out looking for a tennis partner, I met this truly lovely couple who basically adopted me. I would bike to their house to play matches on their backyard tennis court every day. They loved to take me out to eat at these incredible restaurants. As a foodie, I was in heaven. They let me drive their cars on the beach, use their surfboards, drive their jet ski. I ran out of gas in the middle of the ocean and I had to get rescued by the Coast Guard. And they took me out on their yacht and even flew me out on their private jet to nearby islands to explore in the morning, and then would fly me back in time for my job at the club. They were the most kind and wonderful people and never asked for anything but my company in return. I think they missed their daughters, who both lived out of state. I fell out of touch with them, but I think of them often and I hope they're doing well. A friend of mine worked for an upscale concierge chauffeur service. His most memorable moment came when he lost Marie Osmond. Fairly simple gig, go to the airport and pick up Marie Osmond, who was to be the featured entertainer at a private event. The plane comes in, he meets her, and she has a carry-on bag, but her checked suitcase containing her stage dresses and makeup was missing. She was unflappable though, asks to be taken to the nearest upscale mall. He does as instructed. She goes into a large upscale department store, selects 2 long sequined cocktail dresses, and goes to the fitting room to try them out, without him of course. Unfortunately, there are 2 entrances and exits to the fitting room, and Marie Osmond exits out through the other side and can't find my chauffeur buddy, who is waiting patiently on the side she'd entered. 20 minutes passes. He thinks something has gone wrong, so he grabs a female manager and asks her to go into the fitting rooms and ask for Marie Osmond. The manager thinks she's being pranked and declines. Chauffeur buddy is in mini panic mode, running wildly around the store, asking random customers, "Have you seen Marie Osmond? Have you seen Marie Osmond?" Store security is summoned and he's asked to leave the premises right now. He calls his employer and tells him he has lost Marie Osmond. The employer doesn't have her cell phone number but has her agent's number and he is not accepting calls. She, in the meantime, has taken a cab to the gig thinking she's been forgotten. Lots of apologies eventually ensued and there were no repercussions. When we were in high school, my friend used to caddy at a local country club. One guy really liked him and asked if he'd be willing to drive him around while he went out partying. This was like 2003 and in a pretty rural area. My friend agreed. He picked the guy up at like 8 p.m. Right off the bat, the guy handed him $200. He went to a bar for a little bit and my friend sat in the car. The guy came out, handed him like another $200 and told him he had to visit his friend real quick. He went and got a bunch of white snow. They went to another bar, he handed my friend another $100 and told him to look out the window and turn up the radio. He then blew several lines. He came out a couple of hours later with a girl. He was married with kids, by the way, and handed my friend another $200 and they went back to her house. After they'd done the deed, he came out and asked to be taken to the beach. At this point, it was like 2 or 3 a.m. My friend said the guy slowly walked around the beach, went into the water up to his ankles, in his shoes, and threw a bunch of rocks into the water and then sat in the sand for about 45 minutes. He came back to the car and asked to be driven home. When they got out of the car, he hugged my friend and gave him $500 and asked him to never tell anyone what happened. None of us really believed my friend when this happened until the guy he drove got arrested for a violent outburst and possession of white snow about 6 months later. You know, as weird and haunting as this event was, $1,300 for a day's work is something that I would literally have brought a new car in order to do when I was in university. A buddy of mine ended up picking up a Netflix producer while doing Uber. He said they had a great conversation as he brought him to his hotel. The producer invited him up for a drink, and since my friend was a film student, he thought it'd be a good idea to try and get some good networking in. They hung out for about an hour when he asked my friend if he knew of any massage places with happy endings. He didn't, but the guy paid him $500 to bring him to the closest massage place, which was only a few miles out. Upon dropping him off, he gave my buddy a card and said, "There's a big party and festival I'm hosting. That's your ticket in. I'll let you know if I get that happy ending." He got that happy ending. Not a chauffeur, but this happened because of a lack of one. Basically, a guy I used to know back when we were teenagers, 17 years old, had a lot of money. We just never knew how much until I was invited to go on holiday with him and some other friends. All expenses paid, of course. Anyway, we took a taxi to an area where this guy wanted to buy an apartment and wanted to show us, so we went with him and ended up spending the whole day walking around the area. We got tired and eventually wanted to go back to the house, but we were so far away that walking was not an option unless we wanted to walk for about 3 hours. Neither of us had enough cash to pay for a taxi, and back then taxis didn't accept cards. This was around 2000 or 2001. So this guy rings his dad and asks if he could send a chauffeur to pick us up, but the chauffeur turns out was busy doing some deliveries for the dad. So the dad instead says, "There's a Mercedes-Benz dealer's shop near where you are. I know the manager there as I've brought several cars from them. Just go and buy a car with the credit card. You can leave it in the house and we'll figure out how to bring it home later." So we went to this dealer shop and somehow in about 30 minutes the manager did all the paperwork and we ended up driving back to the house in a brand new Mercedes C-Class, which we used for the rest of the holiday. Mine isn't something that was overheard, but something that happened. At least I hope nobody could hear it. A friend of mine who worked in music was in a limo with Robin Thicke and a load of dancers and models driving around London. We're all just chatting, and out of nowhere, Robin Thicke just starts going south of the border on one of the models. There was an awkward split-second silence, and then everyone just carried on and ignored it. Holy crap, I have a Robin Thicke story too. One of the administrative assistants at my work went to Vegas and met Robin Thicke there. He asked her at the bar if she wanted to come back to his room. When she said sure, he whipped out an NDA to have her sign. The guy cheated on his wife so much that he had paperwork drawn up so women couldn't tell on him.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I used to drive limousine and taxi. One time I got the manager of a fairly famous Canadian band in my car asking me where to buy white snow. I had no idea where and I told him that, so his bright idea was to find a working girl, hire her and ask her. I told him I couldn't help him pick up working girls either. He was disappointed but understood. He had me drive down a well-known street until he saw a working girl. He asked me to pull over, got out of the taxi, paid the fare, and then immediately flagged me down as a new ride. I knew what was up, but whatever. He gets back into the car with the working girl and she tells him what house to go to for some white snow. I take them there and wait a bit. They come back out and I drive him back to the venue. Then he offers me 2 free tickets to the show, which I gladly accepted as I loved that band and I'd seen them 3 times. Alas, I was still working during the show. I gave them away to 2 friends who had never seen the band. They had a good time and I had a fun story to share with them about how I scored those tickets. Not really a shocking conversation and hardly a famous person, but it was interesting how easily and full of trust people can be about searching out and buying substances in a strange city. For the record, this was 2003.
My dad was a chauffeur back when I was younger, and he told me a story of driving the director of a company down the road with the Blackpool illuminations in the company limousine. The director was standing up out of the sunroof with his arms out, waving at people as he drove past. What the people on the street didn't know is that in the back of the limo there were 2 working girls going to town on his eggplant. Out of all the answers, this is the one that made me go, aye, that sounds about right. Frickin' Blackpool. I have multiple people pay me handsomely to let them smoke green herb in the car. Heard a French guy yelling at his wife that $10,000 was too much to pay for 2 bracelets that she brought. Also overheard a lot of business deals with absurd amounts of money referenced, like tens of millions. I've had conversations at work where I've said just buy 2 of the gosh darn things, it's only $25K. Kinda crazy to go from that to debating if I want to keep my HBO subscription that night. My sister was in a limo once and asked the driver about his most interesting ride. The driver said that he'd picked up some models who were going to a PETA demonstration. I'd rather be bare than in fur, or whatever it was. He got to the location, they stripped down in the back of the limo, and he waited until they were done with the photo op. You know, I guess if you're going to go and bare it all for the public and be photographed to boot, why not get trashed in a luxury stretch before you get there? Drove limo at Marquette University during undergrad and grad school. Some of the students that went there were obscenely wealthy. Limos are the vans that drive drunk students anywhere on campus and a few blocks outside of campus. A couple of things I remember randomly from it. 1, a drunk guy leaving his wallet on a van and another driver calling it so me and another supervisor could take it to campus police. We picked up the wallet from the driver and opened it to get the student ID so they know who to email. There had to be a few grand in there, and when we called the kid to tell him about it, he told us we could just keep it because it was too far from his dorm to bother picking it up. Okay. 2, I picked up a couple of girls from AITA, and they spent the entire ride talking about how it was ridiculous that one of the girls' parents planned on making her pay for her own apartment after graduation, and there was nothing even livable under $2,000 a month. The school is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 3, Mardi Gras is the name of a campus ministry trip where you use your spring break to build houses and drink in somewhere that doesn't get snow in April. One of the people on my van was getting a free night of drinks from his buddies because he paid for everyone's trips. I think it was like $1,500 per person if I recall correctly. 4, it's a free service and a frat star tried to pay me for the ride with a Ziploc baggie of white snow. I said no and he called me a legend and left $20 in the cup holder before I realized it. 5, rich kids are rich, but foreign rich kids are usually on a different level. Was talking to a guy from Spain who said his dad did something with movies over there, I don't know. He had an actual Rolex on and ended the conversation with, "So anyways, do you know where to find any crystal? Rich foreign kids are crazy." I had a Russian friend and I'd always just generally assumed he was at our university in Scotland on some kind of scholarship. He seemed to only own 1 set of clothes, was the top of the math program, and drank a lot of vodka. He did once try to sell me a submarine when he was drunk, but that happens to the best of us. He seemed to fit in until his dad showed up and they flew to Paris for lunch. This is not a limo story, but this thread reminded me of a rich guy story. My daughter played soccer for many years, and at one practice a guy drove up in a Ferrari, got out and started talking to another of the dads on the team. After a few minutes, the guy left and another of the dads went over there and asked him who that guy was. He replied that the guy was his lawyer or something. I came to find out years later that the guy in the Ferrari was a multimillionaire and had one and only one client, that dad, and his only job was to handle the dad's charitable donations. So this guy got filthy rich donating millions of dollars of someone else's money and taking a percentage off the top. The dad, who was apparently worth several hundred million, never came across as rich at all. He wore sweats to and was at every practice and game. He drove a Camry. He had been married to his average-looking wife for 25 years, stuff like that. Acted like a normal guy like the rest of us. One of my best friends used to drive Uber in a wealthy area of LA. He told me so many stories about drunk celebs and TikTokers in his car. Someone offered him a bag of green herb because they felt sorry for their friend throwing up in the back seat. Most people were just normal though. Some highlights: Quentin Tarantino and Trisha Paytas were baking out in his back seat when they were secretly dating. Mike Tyson is apparently very nice in person and also a giant pothead. Somebody on Gossip Girl and her friend were arguing about chicken nuggets and tried to get him to go through a Wendy's drive-thru during the lunch rush when there were already 10 cars in line. Addison Rae and one of her friends took their shoes off and left them in the car. Leo DiCaprio took more than 5 minutes to find the car. He seemed out of it and was quietly bobbing his head listening to music on his headphones. I had the distinguished privilege of working with a multimillionaire one time for a couple of days, and I was just astounded at how out of touch he was with people. One conversation, he was talking about how he hated all of the new homes they were building and liked old castles, so he was having a castle in Scotland disassembled and reassembled here in the US piece by piece. On another occasion, he asked me why I wasn't in college yet. The job was after high school and I was working as a plumber. And he gave an, "Oh, right," when I told him I couldn't afford to go yet and had to save up. About 25 years ago, I had a summer job at a very Tony country club. 6-figure joining fee, 5-figure continuing membership dues, and that got you nothing but the privilege of paying top dollar for rounds, food, and the other services. I was a porter some of the time as we had cottages on club grounds for members to stay and make a weekend out of it. One of my duties was driving members to and from airports, usually private airports for private jets. One time I'm driving 2 guys to the airport and one of them starts complaining. Seems he and his wife are always fighting over who gets the jet every weekend and where they want to go. Well, the other one replied, "My 3rd jet is actually just gathering dust right now since my son went to college. Take it off my hands?" They shook on it right there in the van. Very relatable. None of us know what to do with our extra jets once we've paid for a new building at Harvard to get our kid in there and he finally leaves. Good sweet Lord, can we please eat the rich yet? A small part of my family was Chicago Mafia. Grandpa told me a story of a family wedding in Chicago they went to in the late 60s. They were picked up at the airport by a limo with some high-ranking family members. On the way to the hotel, they were stopped about 8 times by various police officers. The officer would walk up to the driver's window. The chauffeur would reach into a money bag and pass a bill to the officer. Nothing would be said and they'd take off again. Eventually, my grandpa asked if they were being bribed. His cousin, the one in the mafia, laughed and said, "No, it's Thursday. That's when we pay our boys." So I guess that's how they did it. A traffic stop and in the open where it's not expected. So I'd imagine that chauffeur had seen some things. I used to caddy at a fairly exclusive country club in Massachusetts. It's the kind of place where no matter how rich you are, you can't buy a membership. You're either born into it or you marry a member. As a result, a lot of the members like to show off their influence by inviting guests who'd otherwise be unable to play at the club. Someone invited Mitt Romney. We were given a heads up that the governor, he wasn't a senator yet, would be coming and they wanted us to know how to act around him. We were told he wanted to be treated like anyone else, but they didn't want us to gawk. So I guess to make sure us dumb caddies weren't gawking, we were instructed to not look at or acknowledge the governor. Because this is precisely how we'd treat other people. I did get to shake his hand and chat a little bit. He was friendly, personable, way nicer than a lot of the members. I still don't like a lot of his politics, but he seemed nice enough in person. I was driving an Uber and I picked up 2 businessmen in an industrial park. They were building developers. The man who was clearly the boss spoke to me as if I were a man and I was always the driver who picked him up. Although they were clearly from the Middle East, they chose to speak English. Maybe they thought it was rude not to, being in the US, but if that would have been rude, I'm not sure what the rest of the conversation was. They spoke about the future of business as if it were all so futile, and how everyone will be either very wealthy like them or very poor, and how their children really won't be able to get jobs either, but they also won't need to. I logged more than 4,000 rides between 2015 and 2017, and that was one of the weirdest. The other weirdest guy I picked up from a dispensary. He was a really good-looking, very well-dressed and clearly well-to-do guy, but he was in some sort of mental distress. He wanted to visit more dispensaries but had clearly already bought the max. I got his hotel information through conversation and went there instead. On the way, he told me, in all seriousness, all about how his father was God, which meant he was Jesus. "Didn't you notice how much brighter the sun became when I got in your car?" He was serious. He also followed Guns N' Roses like they were the Grateful Dead. He thought Axl Rose was the smartest man alive. He didn't really notice when we got to his hotel instead of the dispensary. I did ask him if he had taken any other substances that day, and he insisted he hadn't. That was also one of the weirdest. Managers. What small things immediately make you not hire a person, and why? I just look for honesty and some self-respect. The roles I hire for are fairly entry-level, so you don't need to be amazingly qualified or anything. I get a lot of young people for interviews, and what annoys me the most is when they arrive dressed in casual clothes. I don't disregard their application over clothes, but I do sit and wonder why their friends or parents or partners let them come to an interview in such sloppy clothing. That said, I did have a weird one. I hired a guy from a group-like session, as he was probably the best and most confident person on the day. After hiring, a few weeks in, he starts to become unreliable with his late finishes. When I ask him what's up with that, he comes in one day, on his day off, and says he needs to speak to me. He then tells me that he'll be resigning because he can't make the later working hours, and that he's sorry for letting me down and appreciates us giving him a chance. He then lifts his jean leg and shows me an electronic tag on his ankle. Turns out he was released from prison 2 days before my interview and said he never brought it up because in a room full of people, why would anyone employ the ex-con? When I thought about it, he's probably right. Me and my colleague who were interviewing probably would have influenced our decision on him if we knew, and he said he just wanted a fair chance. So the tag prevented him from being outside his home after 7 p.m. as he was charged for supply when younger. I ended up calling the parole officer and the HMRC and eventually altering his curfew on the basis that I said he would have to be jobless if they didn't, and if you don't allow him to have a legitimate job, what are the chances of him re-offending going to be? He ended up being one of the best employees for a while. We were looking for engineers and we had this guy apply. He had a pretty sizable amount of experience to the job despite being a fresh graduate and had experiences and training in other fields related to the production industry. I asked him what position he was applying for and offered him the assistant production engineer based on his credentials alone. He looked at me with a disgusted face like I'd just insulted him. I asked him what was wrong and he replied, "Nothing really, it seems like a pretty good position, but I want something better because I can clearly see you're impressed by my resume." I took the bait and partly also due to our immediate need for engineers, asked him what his preferred position would be. He immediately answered that he wanted a supervisory position, like the general production manager. I asked him why he wanted such a position. His reply? "Seems like one of those jobs where I can sit in the office and play games on my phone all day without having to actually do anything." I quickly gave an excuse to end the interview right there and just told him we would call him. We didn't. Moral of the story? Never tell your potential employer you just want to sit on your butt all day and do nothing. I learned so much in some of these videos. Now I know that I shouldn't have said that in every interview in the past 5 years. You'll get there eventually, narrator. For phone and Skype interviews, don't Google every question I ask you to get the right answer. It's a dead giveaway when after every question there's 10 seconds of umming and then a textbook answer. You'd be surprised at how often this happens. I did a lot of phone interviewing of programmer candidates at my last job. There's nothing like hearing the tickety-tack of a keyboard after each question, like, "Holy crap, dude, get a quiet keyboard if you're gonna do that crap." The most fun is hearing other voices whispering in the background. I guess it at least shows the candidate is all about teamwork. When the interviewee ignores the person who asks the question and instead talks to the person they think has the most power in the room. This has happened in entry-level positions, but I also helped interview for a position that would be working at my same level, as a partner. My manager told me the decision was ultimately up to me because I knew what I was willing to work with and what was needed for the role. I had a man come in and he wouldn't look at me, didn't shake my hand, and every time I asked a question, he looked at my manager for approval. Yeah, hard pass. I don't want to work with a guy who has no respect for me. Being blazed. Don't smoke green herb before interviews. It doesn't relax you, you just look and sound weird. Talking about your broccoli and chocolate diet to improve your telekinesis. This happened to me about 15 years ago. Showing up late for an interview already puts you in the hole. Not addressing it or apologizing for it will make it complete. Turn a negative into a positive and show you have accountability. Not addressing it shows that you don't have respect for me and my time. This. I don't care if you're a little late if you're apologetic and seem embarrassed or regretful when you turn up. That shows me that even though you've met a challenge and made an error, you can be humble about it, apologize, and move forward. People that showed up to an interview in dirty sweatpants and a hoodie or whatever and had no idea what the position really was. As a pharmacy or tech assistant. It happened more than once. Oh, and one guy basically said this. "I don't know, the pay would be nice, I guess." Same guy, different gem. When I asked why he had had 7 jobs in the past 2 years, he was like, all of those guys were buttholes, man." 1. Check your grammar and punctuation over and over. Correspondence via emails should be professional too. It's not a time to use shorthand like you'd send around in text messages to friends. Bad grammar in emails usually catches my attention right away in a negative way. There was a young woman interviewing for a position with me who was very creative and extremely qualified. However, her written correspondence was so poor with me that I knew she'd do the same thing with external clients, and she didn't get the position because of this. 2. I'll usually hire someone who's coachable and has a great attitude over someone who might have more experience but doesn't get along with others. One's attitude is really a game changer, and I'm more prone to hire those with a positive outlook on life. 3. If you want an in with the company, don't always go straight to the top. Maybe reach out to a lower-level employee and learn from them and get tips. I always take a look at candidates referred to me by internal employees, no matter how high they rank in the company. 4. Be genuine and authentic. I love candidates who straight up tell me, "Look, the last few years have been really hard for me. I jumped around jobs and looking back I realize I could have stuck them out a bit longer. But I learned from the experience and I want to do better. We're humans too. We get that life can be tough, so I appreciate people who are real and authentic. 5, and lastly, don't be an excuse maker and go on and on about issues. This makes me think you'll do the same in our corporation. During the interview process, be open and authentic, yet to the point and matter of fact. I believe every question can and should be answered in 30 seconds or less. I'm reading this thread as a hiring manager for a more or less janitorial position, and we're so badly hurting for employees at that spot that we'll pretty much hire anyone that applies so long as they clear the background check and the substance screening. Raggedy clothes? You're hired. Don't really have the greatest answers to questions? You're hired. Can't really explain or give a reason for the stuff on the application? You're hired. You physically showed up to the interview? Hired. It's crazy that the people that interview the best, show up dressed as well as they can be in their means, and clearly want any job, are more often than not the ones that get shot down because of background. It sucks that the ones getting hired over them quit 2 weeks in because they don't like cleaning things up. Be me, the hiring manager. The first thing I do when I get a stack of applications is throw half of them in the trash. I don't want any unlucky people working here. I mean, you'd hope that they'd actually comb through resumes for relevant qualifications at a certain tier of work, but then again, I'm absolutely certain this happens regularly for entry-level jobs. The biggest one for me was always whether they were responding thoughtfully and specifically to prompts or just using vague interviewee language. If they answer even one question in a condescending tone, it's not a good sign. Everyone will hate them and you for hiring them. If they show bad attitude in an interview, wait till they've been on the job a few months. It tripped me out when I started doing interviewing and hiring for the first time. I had no idea how weird and rude people could be when applying for a job. It gave me a lot more confidence going forward when applying for jobs myself when I realized just being able to string coherent sentences together on my resume and being a normal, friendly human being in person was putting me ahead of the pack. If you put it on your resume, I'm going to ask you about it, so don't add filler. How do you feel about someone having virtually no side activities? I will ask about anything in this category. In fact, I like to start with this area because it can be a good way to break the ice and put someone at ease. I don't care if there's only one, as long as it's real. This isn't a college application, but if you like it and can show enthusiasm about whatever you've put down, great, even if it's just the one thing. I'm more turned off by someone that has a laundry list of interests and apparently never sleeps. If you have something on your resume, it's fair game for me to ask you about it. If you struggle with basic questions about it, game over. Treating everyone but the hiring manager disrespectfully. I was in a management position in fast food. I didn't do the hiring, but one minor responsibility was accepting applications that people brought in and answering any initial questions. The hiring manager always listened to the other managers' initial impressions of the applicant. So many applications were thrown out of the stack without ever being considered because the applicant didn't think anyone mattered but the person that made the final decision. I even had one lady come in and basically tell us that she would definitely be hired and placed over us in management and that she planned on cleaning up our act. We had a good laugh with the hiring manager before tossing her app in the trash. A bunch of places I worked had a system where you rated resumes you were handed. Most of us used smiley faces or frowny faces. If the person was a jerk, you'd just put a sad face on it after they left. If they were nice, friendly, and professional, you'd put a smiley face on. One place used a 1 to 5 star rating. Same idea. If you, the frontline person who took the resume, would want to work with them, you'd put 5 stars on the top of the resume. If you thought they'd be awful to work at, 1 star. It really strongly influenced the decision, to the point that anyone with a sad face or 1 star got the resume thrown out before you'd even left the office. There was a guy who, when I walked into the conference room to interview him, told me to have a seat and said, "Let's talk." In the interests of clarity, no, he wasn't joking. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I have a small exterior remodeling company and do all of my interviews on site. If someone gets out of their vehicle and flicks their cigarette in the yard, it's pretty much over. People are trusting us as a business to come to their homes, usually when they're not there. Don't litter in their yard or in their neighborhood. For some reason, people interviewing have regularly looked at the tools we're using and talked condescendingly about them and explained they learned on another brand or style and that their way is better. Done. I'm open to discussion about tools and methods, but the interview isn't the place, and leads me to believe I'm going to have to work hard to make you use my methods on jobs. There's a difference between making sure we're on the same page and trying to prove you know more than the guy you're trying to get a job from. And it's never about the actual tools. I've done hiring for other businesses before my own. It's about showing a specific attitude. These guys might do well in the industry, but my business prides itself on bringing positive attitudes to projects for homeowners, and those guys can't help with that. I once had a guy spend the entire interview explaining to me why we were literally doing everything wrong. He was just finishing up his bachelor's degree and had no practical experience. I'm hiring because my business is successful and growing, not because I need some college kid to come in and use his vast knowledge to turn things around. I assume he thought this would show how smart he was. I'm totally open to new ideas and new gear, but you need to show me that you're someone whose opinion I should trust. For me, that trust is going to grow over months of you proving yourself, not an interview where you're implying I'm an idiot. Aha, note number 2 for the narrator, don't call interviewer moron. Okay, this is great. I'm going to be hired as a law guy or something in no time. How seriously do you take the position? I hire for an admittedly very easy job. I had a guy tell me he only wanted it because it was really easy and he wouldn't have to take it seriously. He was one of 100 applying for 6 spots. He didn't get it, and every time he interviewed for that spot after, I knew I wouldn't hire him. If you're wondering why honesty mattered so much, the job is very easy, but we work with extremely valuable equipment and a mistake can cost us hundreds. Someone who's going into the position openly not taking it seriously when 100 are going for the same spot isn't something I want, since you'll naturally take the job less seriously over time. Also, I've only interviewed him once a semester, it's totaled maybe 3. In his place, we hired awesome employees who are up for management positions. I have no regrets. I helped with interviews at a place I used to work at. When I asked one applicant if she had any questions, she wanted to know if you had to clock in and out for lunch, and about how late you had to be before you got into trouble. So, pro tip, avoid that. The interviewees I always endorsed were the ones who'd say, "That one task that everyone hates? I don't mind it. It was a hospital job and we had to do phlebotomy." Had an applicant that told me she didn't mind doing blood draws because she had a lot of experience and was really comfortable with them. I went back to the hiring manager and was like, please, hire her. My last paycheck job wouldn't hire anyone who was rude or dismissive to the receptionist. This should be 100% a criterion, because if he or she is a butthole to the support staff during an interview, they'll be twice as bad while they work there. Just because you make more than the receptionist doesn't mean you should treat them like crap, because they're the ones that keep everything running. I'm not a big computer or email person. Then get the frick out and don't come back. This is an office job in 2019. Both of my parents claimed they got laid off in their mid-50s because of age discrimination, when they were both proud, not computer people. I've never understood how someone can proudly proclaim their willful ignorance. Embellishing. Job applications, like dating profiles, a little embellishment is expected to make yourself look good and most people can read between the lines. But I once had a guy, when writing down his responsibilities at his previous job, put a bunch of things like used whisk, spatula, and other kitchen utensils to circulate sauces and ingredients to bring all food to adequate cooking temperature when being prepared. It was all written like that. This guy supposedly had like 5+ years experience, and the best he could give me was a fancy way of saying he stirred stuff. I feel like if a job is going to write a long, corporately worded job post with that kind of language, they should expect that in a resume. Not saying that's what happened here, but that bothers me. Like, just say I'm going to lift a box instead of assist with handling rectangular objects. I got a text message response to a voicemail I left responding to an application saying, "Hey, I'm at the Steelers game, so I obviously don't want to talk about a job today. How's Monday looking for you? I'm available 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I didn't even respond. I called an applicant who answered, "Who is this? The frick you want?" And I went on to further embarrass him by informing him that I wanted to talk about an application, but never mind. He proceeded to tell me I was a lying B-word and that my area code on his caller said I was in a different city and he's no idiot. Literally the neighboring area code. So the small things, I won't hire total buttholes. You don't imagine how some people just apply and then don't remember. I've had this kind of conversation at least 3 or 4 times a day. "Hi, I'm calling you from my institution's name. You sent us an application for a job." I didn't remember sending you an application. I can see you applied yesterday at 7:32 p.m. Are you still interested? No, thank you. Bye. Note that at this point, they don't even know more about the job that could have potentially made them not interested anymore. When I was a hiring manager, it was quick, fluffy, and BS kind of responses to my questions that put me off. Good examples of things I did like to see. When I asked one person a detailed question, the interviewee said, "That's not a question I get too often, but it's something I want to be tactful about. If I were to think about it for a second," and then cue response. It really impressed me how they were honest and very professional about not having an immediate answer, which happens day to day in the industry I was formerly in. One last thing, if you have an objective on your resume, make sure it applies to the job at my company. I can't tell you how many times people have an objective about getting a job in an industry that doesn't even relate to my company. Remember to update this. Yep, even I knew to change my identical resume's mission statement at the very least. Come on, fellow slobs, at least put something from a copy-pasted list of different industry objectives into your resume. I cannot abide rudeness. Please, thank you, excuse me, pardon, you're welcome, a basic. Disparaging comments about other people just tell me you have no substance of your own, and I would hate working with you. Arrogance is just another way of telling me I'm going to have to manage your ego, and I can't be bothered with that crap. You can have the best experience and qualifications in the world, but if you come across as an absolute member, I don't want you. Sorry. On a side note, it makes me sad how many people get passed over for their age, family situation, medical needs, among other things. You can't outright say it legally, but it's super obvious that this happens with a generic excuse thrown in their faces. The best employees I've had come with a little baggage. Don't write them off. They tend to be super grateful, and while you can make some accommodations, flex hours for childcare, extra breaks to administer medication, can't do certain things because of a disability, they usually go above and beyond for an employer and clients that treats them right, and that attitude is really the number one thing in my book. You can teach skills and knowledge, but you can't teach that. Once had a guy apply for a job advertised as just call center because we needed to be discreet in the ad. His cover letter and resume talked about his previous call center experience selling mobile phones and all the people he had saved and converted to his church. He kept telling us that mission work is basically just sales because you're selling Jesus. He somehow got through to the reference checking stage. There weren't many applicants. I called his employer and found out he was asked to leave after 6 months of formal performance management because he kept telling people who he called up that they could either enter into a 2-year contract for a new mobile phone or go to his church every week for 2 years to make it up to him for the lost commission. He had access to their addresses, so he would confirm their addresses and say he would meet them out front of their houses at 8 a.m. on Sunday to take them to church. After dozens of complaints and about 6 months of performance management, he still couldn't understand how that was inappropriate and creepy. The job I was recruiting for was a domestic violence crisis intervention call center to help people experiencing extreme domestic stuff to relocate. I'm so glad we didn't put him in there. When I ask a relevant question pertaining to the job they're trying to get hired for, and they say, "Why do you think you need to know that?" Those were the exact words from the guy I was asked to interview. I'm just imagining Ron Swanson asking that question in this interview. The question I asked was about BFD, bidirectional forwarding detection, and whether he had used it in a place of a routing protocol's inherent link failure detections. It was relevant because we do it for some customers and it's kind of important that you're familiar with it. I'm amazed at how many candidates lie. Don't do that. What's the worst one you've had? A guy said he'd never been in trouble with the law. Later, I asked an unrelated question about licensing and he mentioned that he'd had a hang-up. I asked if he wanted to explain why, and he said he had a dishonorable discharge from the military due to a violent felony conviction. I've hired well over 200 people, mostly for jobs that involve medium to heavy-duty machinery operation. Some on the public road, but mostly on private grounds. These positions paid anywhere from $30,000 Canadian dollars to $120,000. A couple of things I did find out that surprised me as I learned the position. Spelling and grammar issues in resumes or a shortage of description really didn't end up meaning anything. At first I would throw these ones out, but later I kept them in the shuffle and found more or less the same success as a well-written resume. Clothing? Super sharp, super sloth, none of it really seemed to matter. I found diamonds and trash wearing both. What I ended up basing most of my decision on in the past couple of years has been parking lot behavior. I don't care what vehicle they showed up in, but as time went on, I discovered that if it took someone more than 20 to 30 seconds to find a parking spot and get parked, they were useless with the machinery I needed them to operate, regardless of qualifications. Likewise with guys that thought they nailed the interview and then gunned it down the road when they hit the street. I found hiring these guys always became huge safety concerns. No word of a lie, parking lot behavior ended up providing me with about 50% of the info I wanted on hiring a person. Once I saw a guy park in about 15 seconds flat. He also left the parking lot in the exact same manner he came in. Totally bombed the interview, and the Homer Simpson tattoo didn't help. But the guy ended up being my train the trainer on a few pieces of equipment. If I'm going to trust you with 5,000 to 120,000 pounds of machinery, I'd better see that you can operate your own vehicle.
What's the rudest question you've ever received? Had bad acne and stupid questions like, why don't you just wash your face or bathe every day? Oh, me too. I never tire of, have you tried washing more? Maybe you eat too much chocolate. Maybe you need to use more expensive products. No way, I totally didn't even think of that. I thought just, F it, I'll walk around for 15 years like a fricking pizza face, completely alienating myself from the rest of the world and being held back from jobs and doing the deed and partners while everyone else builds a fricking life for themselves because frick knows I don't want to wash twice a week. Yes, thank you. I do wash more than twice a week. Sometimes I wash on both days at the weekend. But in summer, when the hosepipe ban is on, I just go swimming in my local duck pond. I've snapped before when these kinds of questions come up. Let's just say it starts with a far too long lesson on how cystic acne works and ends with me explaining that the stuff I use on my face costs more than their iPhone. I'm not proud of this. Well, maybe a little. Are you self-conscious about your teeth? Well, I fricking am now. Are you self-conscious about your black eye? What black ow? Stares intensely at my face. How many times have you broken your nose? The answer is none. I've been asked if the government gives me compensation for being legally a midget. I do not have dwarfism, I'm just really short. Technically, you might qualify for what they're talking about. One of my aunts does, and same thing, she's just really short. My aunt does qualify but refused to get a disabled permit for her car because then she'd have to admit that she's legally a midget. Most common question asked by complete strangers, often without introduction because of the wheelchair, is, can you do stuff in the bedroom? Variations are, does your eggplant work? Can you get it up? Are you a virgin? But another classic is, how do you pee? For all of these questions, I of course perform a live demonstration. My brother gets that all the time from kids. Stuff like, why are your legs broken? He just replies, because I didn't eat my vegetables. Horrified children and smiling parents. More cute than rude. The kids I can understand being too young to not know better than to ask, but grown adults repeatedly asking about the groin functionality of strangers in wheelchairs strikes me as overwhelmingly rude. I wouldn't ask that to a friend, let alone a guy on the street. During the early 90s, I was sporting quite a plumage of long rocker hair, and during the winter and spring, or ski season, I also grew quite a thick beard. One day, I was at a gas station and I noticed two young kids staring at me intently. Their mother was also getting gas, but she was around on the other side of the car. The little boy must have been about 3 or 4, and the little girl was probably about 7 or 8. They were just staring at me. I finally said, "Hi, how are you guys doing?" The little boy turned and whispered something to his sister. She turned to me and said, "He wants to know if you're a boy or a girl." A little bit flummoxed by this forthright assault on my obvious manliness, I stammered, I'm a boy. She said by way of explanation, "He said he's never seen a boy with long hair before." "Well, some boys have long hair," I replied a bit defensively. "I know," she said, "I've seen lots of boys with long hair." "Really?" I replied. "Where?" "Oh, places like the dump." I worked at a Chinese restaurant as my first job, and you would not believe how often I got questions like, "Are they terrible to work for? Do they treat you well? Do you get paid on time and the full amount?" Cripes, it made me so sick to my stomach. He was the best boss and manager I ever worked for, and those kinds of questions irked me to no end. As if he would be an awful boss based on his ethnicity. The biggest jerks that I've ever worked for were from right here. I even saw one butthole customer asking him as if he were a 12-year-old, "Do you live here?" pointing at the floor. He was asking my boss if he lived in his restaurant. My boss replies, "No, I don't live here. I live in a house in his suburb." Cripes. Beyond treating me like gold, he used to tell creepy guys right where to go if they were bothering me. Something that no other boss at a restaurant ever did for me. I always got a free meal every shift, plus he had me sit with his family every evening to enjoy a home-cooked meal at the end of each shift as well.
Are you sure your acne medication is working?
I work in a pharmacy, and a not-too-smart woman stared at my face and asked,
"Do you have pox?"
No, I don't have this mostly eradicated disease. I have some zits. Thanks for pointing it out, though. This. I get so many comments on my acne. If it looks worse, it's all about the latest remedy I just have to try. If it looks better, I must be taking care of myself. People who get normal breakouts really have no idea what it's like to have painful acne that never lets up.
How does it feel to be cheated on?
By the friend of a girl I once dated.
I didn't know she was cheating. When I announced to the people of my local church that I was engaged, a woman came up and politely asked if my fiancé was overweight too. I don't think there's any way to phrase that question politely. Is your husband a big fatty fatter too, huh? Yeah, she is. Is your husband also a C-word? Why aren't you married yet? Well, Mom, I'm kind of a loser. My mum's entire family is convinced that I'm a lesbian and afraid to come out, and lately they've all been dropping these little passive-aggressive hints to make it clear that they're totally okay with it, so I should be comfortable telling them. They all get married and have babies quite young, so that's the only reason they can think of for why I haven't produced a husband and children at my advanced age. I just don't have the heart to tell them that I'm super awkward and weird and not nearly pretty enough to compensate for it. Thus, I'm the spinster cat lady. I too love my family. They're so kind-hearted and gentle and well-meaning. They're all trying their damnedest to do what they all genuinely and kind-heartedly believe is the right thing. I think it's really funny and very cute and sweet, to be honest. They're just wrong. It's simply incomprehensible to them that someone could go this long without a husband and be heterosexual. It happens, I promise. Since some people seem concerned about my romantic prospects, I'll let you know that I do all right for myself. I'm perhaps not marriage material, which is a drag sometimes because company and an active partner is extremely enjoyable. But I've never been wild about having kids, so I'm not all busted up about that at least. I do get the occasional roll in the hay from a Brazilian guy who surfs and plays guitar and has some righteous lats and sweet guns, and that's doing pretty well because he usually leaves shortly after, so I can get back to whatever I was doing before he showed up. No hearts are being broken there, it's all good. Finally decided to gain weight? I'm white and my ex-wife is black. Our kids are mixed but differ a lot in shades of darkness. My oldest son is almost as dark as her, while my younger daughter could pass for white. We were in the grocery store once, and we only had our daughter with us while my son was at preschool. My wife was at one end of the aisle with my daughter in the cart, and I was at the other end grabbing something. A very old lady, maybe in her 70s, came into the aisle on the same side as my wife and daughter, and she had a weird look of concern. I walked back over, and the old lady saw that we were together and started smiling in relief. As we walked away, she touched my arm and said, "Are you happy with her?" I didn't understand, so I asked her what she meant. She said, "Oh, I just mean, is she a good nanny? Would you recommend her services? My daughter needs one. She's using a Latina woman now, but I told her the problem with those people is if she steals something, the police won't be able to find her. She probably has no records. Anyway, I think it's absolutely wonderful that you let her come shopping with your child. People gave me such insults for letting our nanny do that 50 years ago, but you know, times were different." To this day, I still crack up when I remember the look on my ex-wife's face. I never knew eyes could get so wide. The funniest part about it was you couldn't even be mad because in that lady's mind, she was being very progressive and nice. I just politely corrected her and told her she was my wife. The lady seemed genuinely embarrassed, but then quickly concerned again. Honestly, when you are in an interracial marriage, you get so much discreet and indiscreet racism in public that you learn to A, not let it make you angry, and B, judge people based on their intentions. A lot of older people can express pretty racist views while having the best intentions. Sheesh. Well, at least you were able to laugh at it. It might be harder to take so well when you're the minority partner in that relationship, as a commenter here highlights. I had a client that this happened to. She was an army wife and said she quit taking her daughter out for walks on post because so many women could ask how much she was charging for babysitting. I will never forget the disgusted expression on her face and the tears in her eyes when she told me that story. "So, when's the little one coming?" says every single person you know, starting the day after you get married. It gets more intense as time goes on, and in our case, my wife had some trouble getting pregnant, which made it all the worse. I wish people better understood how hurtful this question can be when asked to a woman who may not be able to have kids. You want the question to stop? Answer with, "As soon as God quits killing them in the womb." They'll look extremely uncomfortable and never ask again. Unless they're my uncle, and then they'll laugh uproariously and ask every time they see you. I actually said something like this to someone. They knew we were having issues, but still thought it was okay to jokingly ask when we were going to have a baby. I replied, "When my body stops killing them." Cue awkward silence. While working front desk at a hotel. To note, I'm female. Me? "Hello, how can I help you?" Guy? "Is there a male on duty?" "No, I'm sorry, I'm the only one on duty at the moment." "Oh, well, I was looking to ask for some verbal directions, but if you're the only one here, do you know how to use Google? They have this thing called Maps." He actually spells out the word maps. "I can direct you how to use it, right?" Seriously, has every woman you've ever met been mentally impaired? I was in disbelief. I worked in an IT call center for dial-up customers. We mostly had older Bible Belt users. I got a guy on the phone. "Can I speak with a man?" "I assure you I'm very competent, etc., etc." "Don't use those big words on me and make me feel dumb. Get a man on the phone." So I transferred to the guy in the cube next to me, and then I heard my coworker say, "Yes, sir, I'm a man of color, as you put it. No, sir, there are no white men working at the moment. Would you like to try back later?" You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. How did you get invited? I don't know, maybe that one's just poorly phrased. How do you know the host? They could be looking for a common thread to start a conversation on. It seems likely. At my first adult party, read actual food, parents, no fireball, I was talking to a nice woman and I meant to ask her something like, "Sorry, what's your name again?" What I said was, "Who are you?" After chatting for 15 minutes. I must have seemed like a jerk. How can you be Hispanic and Jewish? This was asked to me by a coworker while I was interning, at age 19. So, are you legally a dwarf? Have you noticed how much weight you've gained? My friend's B-word of a stepmother while she was giving me a haircut. Ironically, I'd lost 20 pounds from the last time I saw her. One time I was walking to Walgreens when a woman approached me and asked if I could spare any change. I had like 50 cents in my pocket and I was in a good mood, so I decided to give it to her. I put the change in her hand and she stared at it for a few seconds, then looked up at me and says, "Is that it?" I couldn't believe she'd asked me that. Sure, it wasn't much, but I didn't have to give her anything. I said, "Yeah, that's all I have," and she scoffed and walked away. I saw her a few times after that, and after the way she had acted, I always turned her away. I came out of a store and a homeless woman asked me for change and I said I didn't have any, but I did have an extra protein bar if she wanted it. She responded with, "Ew, don't you have anything better?" Apparently, beggars can be choosers. So, does she not put out, or is she just one of those women's lib types? I was calling about a job and I had to go through a manager before I got to the main hiring person. The manager was a nice guy, we talked for a bit and he told me he'd pass me on. The hiring person picks up and we start talking. He sounded a little old school douchey, but whatever, then he gets to the personal life. "Just so you know, this is a very family-oriented place. All of us have families and we consider it a very important thing." "Oh, that's good to hear. I'm actually engaged. We've been together for about 4 years. "Oh, that's great. Got any kids maybe on the way?" "Well, no, not yet. I was 21 at the time." "Oh, is she not putting out or is she just one of those women's lib types?" I knew then what a blue screen of death felt like because I could literally not process what he had said. For at least a minute. He asked if I was still there, and I lost my mind. I'd been job hunting for months, been told all sorts of horrible things, been ignored, treated like crap and just had enough of it at that point. I unloaded on him and called the boss. He was also very nice. I told him that I'd had an issue with one of his managers. Without saying anything else, I heard on the other end, "God damn it, Jeff." Jeff was in fact the hiring manager I'd talked to. Why have you been hanging around me and my friends? Mean grade school memories. Are you Chinese or Japanese? I'm neither, by the way. I was asked if I'd been the victim of the unspeakable act when someone found out I was gay. I didn't realize how many wild assumptions I was dodging by being cis, although apparently even if you're just a non-conventional person you can draw them, as the following comment details. I had quite the opposite. My family members asked me, "Why didn't you tell us you're gay? We all knew it anyway." I'm not gay. In fact, I just got out of a long-term relationship when they asked me that. When introducing my first girlfriend to my alcoholic grandmother from Tennessee, seriously the first words out of Grandma's mouth were, "You're screwing her, aren't ya?" Hell yeah, Grandma. Fist bumped that crap. I mean, yeah, that pretty much happened, but it was long before fist bumps existed. Not to me, but my cousin and her then boyfriend were in town for the meet the family routine. My grandmother, "Are you religious or do you still go to church?" My cousin's boyfriend, "I was raised Catholic, but I don't really go to church anymore." Oh, were you mistreated by a priest? Everyone at the dinner table looked everywhere else but at the poor guy. Are you autistic? After trying to overcome my social anxiety. Have you ever hit any of your girlfriends? No? Why would I do that? You know, because you're brown. That was a very awkward first date. A guy was chewing tobacco in my car and he asked if he could just spit it on the floor. Granted, my car was pretty messy, but come on, dude. Some strangers asked, "Are you Filipino?" Me? No, I'm... Are you just Mexican? Oh, that sucks. Boring. Walks away. I'm Colombian. Like Shakira. For all those wondering, my hips do not lie. And I'm starting to feel you, boy. Wait, you're Catholic? But you're Chinese. Further background, I'm Singaporean. Are you Jewish? Your nose is very Jewish. I'm not Jewish, but apparently my nose is very much Jewish. Jewish enough to be Jewish on its own regardless of my religious affiliation. I get this all the time too, which is funny because my Jewish friends will jump in and say, no, she has a pretty big nose. Look at it from the side. Thanks, guys. There have been some pretty awful ones regarding our decision to have an only child. The one that makes me want to react violently is, what will you do if something happens to him? I thought we were past the heir and a spare days. Apparently not. I've got 3. If I lost one, I'd lose my fricking mind and very possibly be rendered unfit to raise the other 2, who also lost their siblings. How is that a better scenario? You're white, so I don't have to pay you back, right? After I'd lent him some money the day before. I was out for dinner with a friend of mine, his dad and the guy that had fixed his car. The guy who had fixed his car asked how we knew each other, and my friend answered that we met while studying abroad. Then the guy asked, "You studied abroad and that's the one you picked? Thanks, bud. You're a real catch yourself." When are you going to quit your day job to stay home and have kids? This one beats all of these rude ones. My dad died in a horrific accident over spring break, and I had to witness the whole thing. It was a boating accident in Florida. So I got back to school, and this kid, knowing full well what happened, said, "Hey man, so how was Florida?" I didn't retaliate, just asked him if he knew what happened. After he replied yes, I just walked away, never talking to him again. Not to me, but to my mum, whose son was born with apparent disabilities. Oh, you must have smoked during pregnancy, didn't you? So, how's your junk and sack? It's a fair enough question. I had testicular cancer. When are you going to try and have kids? To me and my wife, like everyone is super fertile and can conceive a child whenever they try. So, do you have that transmitted disease? Because, of course, having that is a prerequisite for being gay. At 18, I took a trip with my family to Puerto Rico. Our first day there, a local that we were talking to put his hand on my little round potbelly and said, "You'll be a mother soon. How wonderful." I was just kind of chubby and was wearing an oddly fitting dress. I cried a lot. I was 8.5 months pregnant and a woman said, "Do you know that a gym membership is cheaper than eating at McDonald's every day?" When I told her I was pregnant, she just went on to say, "Are you doing your Kegel exercises? Better hope your hoo-ha stays tight. I would recommend just having a C-section so your husband stays interested." People are fricking rude. Also, you have to admire the way that this woman effortlessly pivoted from one kind of crappy and condescending advice to another. She truly has a repertoire loaded and ready to fire from the hip. Did your dad want a boy? I'm a lady. My first name is a very traditional masculine name, Jack. I was not named after my father, but rather 2 other ladies in my family. One named herself, paternal great-great-aunt, whose given name was Oda. She didn't care for it, and the other was named after her father when he died of Spanish influenza right before she was born, great-grandmother. I go by my middle name, which is infinitely more feminine, if still unisex. My name is a source of pride for my family, it's unique and was carried by 2 beautiful women right before my parents thought that I was special enough to have it too. To get to the point, I get asked that question every time a stranger finds out my name, no matter if I'm picking up a prescription, getting my driver's license renewed, or getting fingerprinted for work. I hear it at least twice a month. It's none of your business whether my dad wanted a son or was happy with the daughter he got, but thanks for reminding me that I'll never live up to his standards because I don't have a male member. Thanks for reminding me that our family name will die because I'm a girl. Yes, he bloody wanted a boy, you moron, but that's not why my name is masculine. I also have a masculine name. People have confused me for a guy on paper, but I've never gotten that question. The dumbest I've ever had was, "You do know that's a guy's name, right? You just live around rude people, I guess." I was crashing with my brother and his wife for a mini vacation and catch-up visit since he had moved away. While I was there, he was still on duty, military, during the day, so I would help his wife around the house with stuff as she was in the last 1 or 2 months of pregnancy with the nephew at the time. At one point she needed groceries, so I rode with her to help with any heavy lifting. We went through as normal and got everything she needed, and while we were on the beer and liquor aisle, I asked her if I could hand her the cash for my beer and just tack it onto their total, since she was paying with a card to save time. She obliged, I handed her the cash and then put a 30-pack of bud in the cart. We have to check out and I'm unloading everything onto the conveyor belt and she's waiting to pay. I have no idea what's possessed this fricking clerk. This late 20s to early 30s woman decides to go all high and mighty and blurted out while scanning the beer, "You know, it's not wise to drink when you're pregnant." Jesus would have been awfully disappointed. I was about to pipe up that it was mine, but before I could even utter a single word, my sister-in-law says very flatly, "It's not for me, it's for my partner, and she isn't pregnant." The look on that cashier's face was priceless. So which of you was the girl in the relationship? Neither. Neither of us is the girl, we're both men.
What's the dumbest thing a customer has ever asked you at your job? They asked why I sent them an invoice. I work for an accounting firm. We did a project for them, wrapped it up, and billed it. A few months later, they came back with another project, so we did the work and gave them the bill. They somehow thought that the new project was covered under the previous invoice. I get too many dumb questions to remember them all. Here's a dumb encounter that happened just yesterday. When sending confidential documentation, we would encrypt it and put a password on it. It's common practice to send the document and the password in 2 separate emails. I got a message from this guy saying he couldn't open the document I sent him. I asked, "Did you use the password?"
"Yeah, it said there was an error."
"What password did you use?"
"I just hit OK and it said that I had the wrong password."
"So, did you type anything in?"
"Well, no."
"Could you use the password that we provided you?"
"I didn't think it would work, so I deleted the email."
Oh my God. A group of 4 ladies sat on a table that is reserved for a group of regulars every day. Before I opened my mouth to let them know, one of them said,
"We see a reserved sign, but we're unsure exactly how reserved it is."
Working in the back of an ambulance on a patient with a serious need of nitroglycerin to lower their blood pressure. "Okay, sir, before I give you this medication, I need to triple check that you haven't taken any ED medication in the last 72 hours, and I rattled off all the variations. If you've taken it and I give you this nitroglycerin, your blood pressure could drop dangerously low. Have you taken any of these meds?" "Oh no, never." "Are you certain?" "Oh yes, of course I am." I ran through the list of potential deadly side effects again. "Nope, never took any of them." "Okay then, hold this pill under your tongue." "Hold on, does this household name generic ED medication count?" And he pulls out a pill bottle. "Oh my God, why do you do this to me?" This one nearly belongs in one of our medical videos. They're full of people being asked if they've ever had any serious medical conditions, saying no, and then in the other information field, writing diabetes, former triple bypass surgery, removed prostate, as just incidental, non-important things that didn't warrant bringing up after that question. Long time ago now, I got a call that a user's laptop was dead and wouldn't power on. I go and check it out, I press the button, no life. Plug it into the power and it starts charging. Press the button and it boots just fine. The user wasn't plugging the laptop into power because she thought,
"We had wireless."
Tried to diagnose someone's connection problem for 20 minutes before I overheard splashing and kids. Asked where they were and they were at the pool. They thought the office Wi-Fi extended to anywhere on the planet, apparently. Mildly relevant, I used to work the counter in parts at Subaru, and my manager was helping a customer, which was a rare occurrence for him. And he turned to me and asked, "How many days do we have for a 45-day return?" Selling paint. A woman wants to paint her fence. I give her advice and explain her how to prepare the surface. She then asks, "Do I need anything to apply the paint?" I'm like, "Yeah, a roller or a brush." And she just said, "Oh, I can't just splash the paint on the fence?" She was dead serious. "Woman, this is not Looney Tunes, this is the real world." Vet tech. A lot of people think their dog's teats are ticks. A lot. One man even pulled a, "but he's a boy," on us. I used to work as a bank teller. A lady came up to me and asked to withdraw money. I informed her that she couldn't withdraw money because her account was overdrawn. She was immediately upset, so I had her account checked for fraud. She then explained that all those charges were in fact hers and she wasn't expecting any payments. She was spending money she knew she didn't have. She then asked me why we couldn't just give her more money. It was so weird for me to explain to an adult that banks don't just give out endless streams of free notes. For my name. Not the question itself, but the reason why he asked. I was volunteering as a cashier at a used bookstore for the library. Not my regular job, but I do it often. In comes this older fella who buys a big stack of books for about $10. He was really nice and chatty, though he didn't seem completely aware mentally. Not a big deal, I just had to explain sales tax and the book pricing a couple of times before he seemed to get it. He pays by credit card and I explain to him how to sign the touchscreen for the payments to go through. This is where he asks for my name. I tell him,
He takes the iPad and says he really appreciated my service and happily tells me he's going to sign my name for the card so they will know to send the money to me. Before I can say, no, wait, he's submitted the signature. I can't see his receipt, but he keeps telling me I was great and to keep the change, so I assume he was being legit. I guess I couldn't call it dumb, just bizarre. Made me wonder if he's been signing cashier names the entire time he's had a credit card. Thank goodness the card companies never check those things. When I asked, for here or to go, I get a confused look followed by, what would you recommend? If they have to ask, definitely to go. Can we open the curtains to make the screen brighter while pointing at a projector and screen setup? She seriously thought that more light in the room would make everything brighter as if the projection was some sort of moving painting. I work in AV and I confirm that I've got this question. Also, I get, this doesn't look like it does on my computer. Of course, projecting light looks different than an LED display, especially when you rent the cheapest projector for the biggest screen size. I worked at Kinko's, and on 3 separate occasions, different people angrily asked me why I returned their faxed document to them. They thought that a fax machine was some kind of Willy Wonka thing that sent their original piece of paper to the recipient. A few years ago, far more recent than it should be, I had to send a document to the local council. They asked me to fax it. I asked if I could just scan and email it, and they said no because we need the original. As a 30-year-old who doesn't actually know what a fax is or how it works, I still have the basic sense to know that it doesn't consume the documents fed into it, send the raw material through the ether and reassemble it as the original document on the other side. I think if we'd developed literal teleportation, we would have found other uses for it. I used to work in a call center for a large bank, and a customer phoned while he was in one of the branches and said the queue was too big, so he wanted me to help him. I asked what his query was, and he said the ATM was broken, so he had to withdraw cash. I asked how I could possibly help him withdraw cash from the bank over the phone, and he said, "Why can't you just fax it to me?" Renovating a major hospital when the owner changes their mind again and wants to change the plan after we've started construction. You guys can take care of that, right? With no extra cost? Oh, and the end date won't change, will it? We sure as frick can't, Steve, and it sure as frick will. Those changes are going to cost another $100,000, and now we need to go and buy completely different materials and figure out what the frick you're talking about. The schedule is effed now. This is why construction never ends on the first given end date. I love arguing over change orders. It's seriously my favorite part of the job. You've signed a contract for a Chevy and now you want a Cadillac? Frick you, pay me. Library. Once I checked out several books to a woman and told her the return date. She looked at her friend, then back at me and said, shocked, "You mean I have to bring the books back?" Similar but opposite, at a bookstore I worked at, we changed our return policy from 1 month to 14 days. And so many customers angrily shouted that they couldn't possibly finish a book that fast. We calmly told them, that's the point. We aren't the library. When you buy a book, it's to keep. People buy books, read them, and return them? What the frick? Go to the library, you goddamn jerks. I used to work in computer sales and repairs. Had a customer come up who was maybe 23 years old, saying she couldn't get her laptop to open something. So I took it and opened it and casually asked, "What is it that you can't get open?" She looks at me, shocked, as I open the laptop screen and tells me, "I have been trying for hours to get it to open. How did you do that?" I looked at her, not knowing how to respond, and close it and open it again. She takes it and walks out saying thank you. I took a long look at my computer I was working on and decided that this was the moment that made me quit the job. In short, this woman just didn't know how to physically open her laptop, but she couldn't explain that to me. Worked at a coffee shop where we sell 2 sizes, small and large. I was working the register, ringing up a girl. I asked her what kind of coffee she got, which went fine, but when I asked small or large, she responded with a suspicious, "Why do you need to know? Are you fricking kidding me? Because one is a larger quantity than the other and you pay for that extra amount." When I told her as much, she scoffed and grudgingly told me, "Like, do you think I'm tricking you?" I had another lady at a different coffee shop who was very upset that her Starbucks gift card was not valid, despite the fact that we were very much not a Starbucks. There are more. Working in customer service for 10 years will do that. I work in pharma, as in pharmaceutical company, not a pharmacy, and someone called yelling at me to stop selling her son green herb. I think she thought that somehow we were tied up in the manufacture of illicit substances simply because we made medical ones. I worked at a Mongolian restaurant that served white rice. A guest honestly didn't know what rice was when I offered him some. I had to explain it as those little white things. After 10 seconds of me trying to figure out if he was just messing with me, He looked at me still confused and I just said, never mind. Someone once asked me, why are you guys making it so difficult to find a car parking spot this time of year? It was Christmas time and I was a casual working in a tiny store in a huge shopping center. I didn't even know what to say. How about, because we hate you. In fact, we're going to frame you for murder.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
I work at an Italian restaurant and this guy was looking at ordering a salad. When I asked what dressing he wanted, he kept going back to the pasta sauces and saying, "Sugo, that would be good on a salad, wouldn't it? I'll get that." And I tried to explain, "Sir, those are for pastas, you got the Mediterranean salad." And he responded, "You're right, maybe carbonara, another pasta sauce." I don't get what he wasn't understanding. He seemed like a normal smart dude, but he just couldn't comprehend the differences between dressings and sauces. Reminds me of a lady who assumed everything on the menu was some kind of omelet. "I'll take the skirt steak omelet." That's actually just a skirt steak. Perhaps I could substitute the French fries for eggs for you. "Oh, it's not an omelet? How about this Greek salad omelet?" "Ma'am, that's just the Greek salad. The egg dishes are on this side of the menu, and the ones that are omelets say omelet in the description." Eventually, she picked an omelet that she ended up really liking, but another guy at her table sent back his croque monsieur because he thought it would be an omelet. I don't know what made them think we were an omelet restaurant or something. I mean, in these customers' defenses, I've heard of otherwise intelligent people who by some weird quirk of neurodysfunction just seem completely incapable of reading menus. I will say I've never had two in any of my restaurants at the same time, though. Library clerk here. "Do you have a phone number for celebrity phone numbers?" "No, sir. No, we don't." I worked at Old Navy and an elderly lady walked in and asked where the boats were. She had never been inside an Old Navy and assumed it was some kind of boating store. Someone once effectively told me they were allergic to air. I used to work in an optician's where we'd carry out pressure tests, a few puffs of air onto the surface of your eye, where quite literally the machine just blows your eye with, air. The customer was adamant that she was allergic to it, couldn't have it done, and in fact accused me of not knowing what I was talking about. This one was just 2 hours ago. One of my users came today with an iPad. When I asked what the problem was, she just said that when she holds the power button and home button down for 10 seconds, the tablet shuts off and takes a minute to restart. That was her whole problem, that if she holds the power button, it turns off. She called it the fricking power button. She was trying to reboot it because it was acting weird, and then got startled when it did. I used to work at a fine jewelry kiosk in a mall. Our jewelry included items like gold bracelets and necklaces, bonded with sterling silver rings with cubic zirconia gems, gold engagement rings with diamond chips clustered together, rather than one large diamond, etc. I had a lot of regulars, and this one woman would come in often and ask of every item she was interested in, "Is this real?" I explained what bonded means and how we don't sell diamond rings for $25, but the rings were indeed certified sterling silver with synthetic gems. I gave her information like this over and over again, day after day, and she would follow up every explanation with, "Okay, but is it real?" I used to work at a grocery store deli. My co-workers for some reason got more stupid questions than anyone else. We'd swap stories every shift, but one went a little like this. "Hi, what can I get you?" "The 8-piece chicken." How many pieces are in it?" How many pieces are in the 8-piece chicken?" There are 8 pieces in the 8-piece chicken." "Okay, I'll have that, please." To be fair, the lady was awfully polite, but how many pieces are in the 8-piece chicken is still a stupid question. A few people suggested maybe she meant how many of each piece. No, she meant how many pieces are in the 8-piece chicken. I said 8, packaged it up, and she went away happy as a clam. "Can I have chicken medium rare?" No, you cannot. I once had the exact same thing happen. The girl, "Can I have the steak medium rare, please?" Guy, "I would like the chicken medium rare as well." "I can't do that, sir, it's salmonella." Then she had to explain to him why you can't eat chicken medium rare. When my brother was 15 and working at Woolworth's supermarket, a woman asked him the quantities of paracetamol she could administer to the kids. He said, "The only advice I can give you is to not take medical advice from a 15-year-old. She just stormed off like he was rude. Being a good bloke, he got me a job there too. I had this bogan come up and we had this lovely interaction. They said, "You got any more of that purple crap?" "I'm sorry?" "You know, purple." I gave her a blanked, shocked stare. She said, Ah, you're frickin' useless. I work in a bank. Actually, not even a bank, it's an advice center, so no cash or anything like that. Not that anyone reads the signs on the way in. I had a pair of women come in, and one says that the other is visiting from France and needs to check how much is in her account, and can I tell her? I ask if she's a customer of this bank, thinking maybe she's a student learning English and has set up an account, because that's quite common. But no, she wanted me to tell her the balance in her French bank account. Work at a zoo, and one year they did a big TV advert to highlight Night Zoo, since we're open until 9 p.m. during summer. At around noon, a woman asked me where was the night zoo. I said, here, but in 6 hours. Working as a flight attendant, London to Miami, in business class. Mum with 1 toddler and 1 5-year-old boards and immediately spots me and asks, where's the crash? I'd like to clarify, my airline does not and has never offered a childcare on board. She was adamant that we should and continued to palm her children off on the crew for the rest of the flight. Luckily, the kids were fairly quiet. Sounds like this woman was successful in her quest to escape the most basic requirements of parenthood. I wonder how trashed she got on the complimentary drinks. I won't go into my job, but I'm routinely asked what 80% or 85% of £100,000 is. I work at an independent pet store. We sell mostly dog supplies, but there's a small section of cat toys and catnip, etc. A newer, pretty gimmicky item we brought in is a line of catnip that's packaged to look like medical green herb. Now, the people know these are catnip products, but I've had multiple people ask, after puzzling over the pack of raw, paper-rolled catnip doobies, but how does the cat smoke it? Or, how can they even hold a lighter? They've got paws! I never do quite know how to reply besides muddled laughter. I work in a poker room at the front counter. The guy says, "Can we get a table?" "Oh sure, what would you like to play?" "No, for dinner." I looked around. "We don't serve food here, this is a poker room." He grumbles and walks away. I worked at Wendy's through high school and part of college. One day a man in his 50s wearing a bright magenta suit walks in and ordered a burger. I asked him, "Do you want a combo or just the sandwich?" And he asked, "What's a combo?" I explained to him that it's a sandwich with fries and a drink, but somehow he didn't understand it. He looked at me blankly and asked, "I want fries and a drink, but what is the combo?" We went back and forth like this for 5 minutes. I don't even remember if he ever got what a combo was or if he ended up getting it. I do remember, however, that I saw him 2 weeks later in a different city at my other job training political canvassers. He was wearing the same magenta suit. I was in such shock that I just stared at him, saying nothing and thinking, it's the combo guy. "Do you guys sell ice here?" No sir, sorry about that." "Alright, have you got anything like ice?" What?" I had a customer ask for a 100% lead crystal decanter. I just explained to him what 20% lead crystal meant. No, you can't get 100% lead because it wouldn't be crystal and also it would kill you. Worked at a small fine dining steakhouse in high school. The restaurant closed at 10 p.m. and one day a table decided to take their sweet time with everything. So it was now 12:30 a.m. and I still had homework to finish and school the next day. One jerk at the table asks, "Man, I bet you really want us to get out of here, don't you?" Yeah, no crap, but I couldn't tell him that I did. I told him, well, while I have school in 6 hours, providing good service means treating every customer as if they're your first one of the night. I shot myself in the foot right there. They didn't leave until almost 2 a.m. and I was late to school the next day. People don't believe that I'm a sushi delivery guy because I'm white. My dad was a park ranger. Rest in peace, Pops. He had many hilarious stories. The best was when he was just starting out at the Grand Canyon. He hadn't learned the finer points of customer service nor the depths of people's stupidity yet. A visitor made a comment on a ranger-led tour of the rim that the Grand Canyon must have made a tremendous noise when it popped open. Dad said, "Yeah, imagine the noise it'll make when it slams shut." The visitor was not amused. Worked at Best Buy, and the 2 dumbest ones were these. Where are your heavy-duty TVs at?" "Oh, is it going into business?" thinking he means it'll be on at all times, like in a bar. "No, it's going in my living room." "What are you planning to use it for?" "For watching. What else?" "I'm sorry, I'm just confused why it needs to be a heavy-duty TV then." "Well, I don't know, you tell me. Y'all are the ones advertising these HD TVs." The second story. "Are these the LED TVs?" "Yep." "Do they run on electricity?" "As opposed to…" "I don't know." "Yes, sir. They still need electricity." I have so many questions as to this person's age and how he hadn't accidentally stopped breathing before this point. I'm a PI. I was investigating a murder and I found an old couple who were friends of the victim and he would occasionally come over to their house. I asked them when the last time the victim came over was, and they spent about 5 minutes arguing back and forth with each other whether it was before or after the murder. I was a driver in Honolulu, picked up a couple that were there on their honeymoon from England. After about 20 minutes, the woman says to me, "So, we're on an island, right?" I honestly thought she was joking until the husband starts saying, "What the heck do you think we've been flying over for the last day?" I live in Canada. I was going on a trip to Florida for a few weeks and driving down with my then girlfriend. She seriously believed we were going across the ocean. So first of all, her geographical knowledge is like an 8-year-old level. And second, we were frickin' driving. I don't know how she thought we'd be able to drive a car across the ocean. She was dumber than a bag of frickin' rocks. A business client asked me if I could recover a file he deleted. I said, possibly, and asked when he deleted it. He deleted it years ago. I work at an animal shelter. A drunk woman asked me if she could have a kitten for free because it was broken. The kitten had one eye. Oh boy, I have a good one. While stationed in Italy in the Navy, a higher-up, E7, in the IT department came to us to ask why our ship's SATCOM, satellite communications, were offline. We told him it was a connectivity problem and it'd be up shortly. He then proceeded to ask why we can't just hardwire it via Ethernet. One of my friends got asked, are handicapped people born with a wheelchair? When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.